Is it pointing in
Okay,
the right direction?
I'm for the extra camera, but in the interest of time though, what I don't want to do is have people starting to leave early because we've got a dead end time.
We don't have a dead end time.
I just want to make sure that people don't waste our time on this end and then say they've got to leave.
Okay,
So I don't mind waiting, and I've got plenty of time.
The announcement on the internet said 6 to 8.
okay. That's right, it did say that, but
You have it turned on, David?
It was simply to go.
Yeah.
you have to put in an end timer, it doesn't work. So I did want.
Okay, I think we're ready.
Ready? Okay, then it's to you there.
Our Father which art in heaven, we're grateful for this day and for all the many blessings we have in our lives. We're grateful for this country that we live in and our freedoms, our liberties, and all that's afforded to us. We're grateful this evening for the opportunity to mediate between good people and pray that we may be able to do this work honestly, transparently, and with a spirit of cooperation. And pray for these things in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much. Now I'd like to go back to where I was.
Before I interrupt.
Before, and that's with introductions. And as I said, I'm Rosemary Tundon, and I'm the Government Records Ombudsman. And then I'd like to turn to you, Sam, to introduce yourself, and then let's go just around the circle and tell me who you are and what your association is.
By all means, so my name is Sam Bushman. I'm a nationally syndicated talk show host, among other things. I make a living in IT. And I filed the grandma request along with a friend of mine, Tim Alders, who is a nationally syndicated talk show host as well, and is a talk show host on K-Talk Radio. And the two of us filed our request because we've seen some strange things in the news about Cedar Hills, and we've seen some unique situations that make us kind of go, ooh, interesting. And as a result, we thought we'd ask for some records. I'm here today primarily because we filed a request. We got back a complete denial. We appealed that denial, and now a partial denial is what we have, except I don't really understand the partial denial, and it's probably because of my IQ of 50. Other than that, I'm here for those reasons, and I represent myself. Thank you.
Hey.
My name is Jerry Deeringer. I'm a citizen of Cedar Hills. I also submitted a grant request along with, I think, 26 others, some of whom are here this evening. And I was asked to represent a few others that couldn't be here. And I'm happy to be here with you, Rosemary, and each of you as well.
Thank you.
I'm gonna step in front of my own camera, it's kind of weird. I like hiding behind the camera, but my name is Ken Cromer. I'm a producer director by trade. I have been an elected official for Cedar Hills, serving from July of '94 to 2000, and have simply been concerned about a number of things I've seen in our community. I filed the original request October 1st of 2013 in behalf of Cedar Hills Citizens for Responsible Government. Much request from the city, please, cut back. We cut back to about a third of the request. Refiled December 9th, freezing the records that were requested from April of 2012 to present, and unfortunately found it necessary to invite others to join into the grandma. Did I not say my name? And I just the background, because the background, just so that everybody knows how I fit into the story, is that then there were others who filed grandma requests, and there is an overlap and a connection, definitely, just for your information. So, yeah.
Next.
Curtis McPherson. If I have a claim to fame, it's I probably have more senior. I was here before it became a city and just watched everything up until now.
And you've seen a lot of changes?
I've seen a lot of changes, and I embrace transparency and honesty, so that's why I'm here.
Thank you.
I'm Wanda McPherson. I've been here since 1991. And I was hoping to find, wondering why there isn't a feeling of transparency when that was what the promises were in the elections, and how that can come about, because the finances have been concerned since they proposed a golf course years ago, which I thought promises of it paying for itself hasn't happened, and I know it's been an issue with all of us, but I hope that we can find out what's can be done about that, or whatever issues that we can talk about.
Thank you.
I'm Linda Fotheringham. We've been in Cedar Hills since 2000. Concerned since actually the golf course issue and other issues that have seemed to be problems. And we did have a son that served on city council for a while at that point in time when, anyway, won't go back there, but we've also belonged to the Citizens for Responsible Transparency and Openness. And, you know, I am very simple-minded about these kinds of things, and it just appears to me that things should be open enough, and if there's a reason that they're not being shown, why is that reason? Why can people not be aware or see it if there's a problem? So I just don't understand that. That's in simplicity my approach.
Thank you.
And I am Russ Fotheringham, and we were also signatories from the Responsible Citizens for Responsible Government in Cedar Hills. And we've been here, as I said, since 2002.
And you like Cedar
I
Hills?
mean, 2000. Pardon? And I like what?
You
We like a lot
Cedar
of good
Hills.
people in Cedar Hills.
I won't ask, never mind.
I'm Eric Johnson. I've been the city attorney since about 2004. I didn't live in Cedar Hills at that time, but I liked the community so much that 6 years ago I moved to Cedar Hills. And I'm glad to be among you and among friends that are here. Rob was on the council when I was first retained.
That's our son.
And I would just mention one legal point. This is a mediation.
Right.
And under the Utah Rules of Evidence, 408,
Yes.
then nothing that is said here can be held binding against anybody who says it if things don't get resolved tonight.
That's right.
And so I just wanted to make that clear so that everybody understood that up front.
Right, and just to add to what you say, I am not able to testify before the Records Committee or talk to the Records Committee on any matter that I've been involved with or in district court. So I think that extends to anything in this conversation tonight, right?
That's right.
Okay,
And just to add, those are standard mediation rules and procedures.
right,
That's nothing unique or different.
that's right,
The goal is to allow the mediation process to work,
right,
and any of those things can inhibit the working of mediation, so.
right. Okay, that's David's spot.
My name is David Bunker. I'm the city manager, city engineer, and have enjoyed working for Cedar Hills since 2001. So I'm glad to be here and nice to meet all of you.
And next,
Kathy?
Kathy.
Oh, sorry, Kathy Alra, Daily Herald. Nothing that is said here cannot be held against them if the resolution is not made here.
Right.
Okay, so if it's printed, is that an infraction of that rule?
Oh, wow.
Well, hold on, legally, because somebody can't be held to what they say in the meeting, that doesn't mean it can't be reported on.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
My feelings
And Eric can
exactly.
challenge that, but I make a living in reporting, so I have a little bit of an idea, which I.
I'm gonna defer to Eric if there's a question. Yes.
I'm Daniel Zapala. I am a professor in the computer science department at Brigham Young University. I also was elected to the city council this past fall and was appointed to the council a year prior to that. I believe very much in openness and transparency. I build open government apps. I've built the first one for the city to put all of our city finances online, and have others that are planned.
That's awesome.
I'm Jenny Reese. I also serve on the city council, and I've been on the city council for about 2.5 years now. Like Daniel said, working hard on openness and transparency, and I'm happy to meet with everyone tonight and answer some of the questions that have been brought up.
Thank you.
I'm Gary Heege, I'm the mayor of Cedar Hills. I was elected to the council in January of, I was elected in the fall of 11, but I was made official in January 2012. I was made the mayor in about July of that same year when the mayor had resigned and I was appointed, and I was elected last fall. And so we're happy to have this meeting tonight and any other meetings that we need to have. We had one about a week or so ago that was very informative and productive for all the people that are there. So, you know, everyone talks about transparency. I think it's an entirely different thing when you actually do it. And so we're happy to be here.
Thank you.
My name is Colleen Mulvey. I'm the city recorder for Cedar Hills. I've been there just about 2 years. I used to work for Pleasant Grove in the recorder's department. I'm a certified municipal clerk, and I'm the certified records officer for Cedar Hills.
So we'll be leaning on you a lot tonight.
I'm Marlon James. I'm an interested resident since 03.
That's awesome.
Very good.
I'm Cherry Loosley. I've been a resident here for about 7 years, and I have dealt with issues like this with the city of Orem back in the late 90s on transparency, and just trying to find out what's going on, become educated. I've heard both sides, and so I'm doing a lot of my own research to find out what's really going on.
That's why you're here.
Mhm.
Good.
I'm Tony Bruff, and I'm a citizen. I've been here since 1995. I don't know if that makes me older or younger, whatever. I represent 2 other people, one of whom might be coming. And so we're here because we're very interested and very concerned about the city.
Okay. So in preparation, that's everyone. Are there any other questions about the ground rules or how we'll proceed? So what I want to cover tonight is 3 things. The first one is the request, what was asked for, and try to understand it. And the second thing is the response, the denial, or what are the issues with the request and how can we resolve those. And the final thing I want to talk about is the fees associated with the request. So does that sound good to everyone? Does anyone have any other thoughts? So in preparation, I
do have a request, though.
Yes?
When someone is asked a question, I would like that person to respond, not someone else on their behalf.
Okay.
Is that a fair assumption?
And would you, somebody asked if, when you speak, can you say your name so that Sam knows?
I'm pretty good, but that would be most helpful for audio recordings as well.
Rosemary, there may be instances, though, where it's best served if, say, Mr. Johnson were to answer it, or Ms. Mulvey. So I kind of anticipate most of the questions are going to be directed at me.
Uh-huh.
But I think that there's certainly instances where any of the people from Cedar Hills, including Mr. Zappala and Mrs. Reese, or Mr. Bunker, may be the best served answering that question. So
That's certainly true.
yeah, so even though, you know, Sam's saying that whoever asked the question should answer it, what I'm saying is that may not be the case. Whoever's best suited to answer that question is the person that will answer it.
Okay.
And in the spirit of cooperation, I would say I understand that and don't disagree in general terms. However, if questions are asked relating to someone's specific responsibility, someone else should not take over that answer.
That's understandable.
And there's a reason that I'm asking.
So I'm passing these binders around, and they're to be used for reference as we talk tonight. And I want to point out the things in the binder. On the one side, there is the Government Records Access and Management Act. And so if you have questions, we might be able to go to this act to find answers. And behind that is the Public Records Management Act. So the first one deals with access to government records, and the second one deals with records management. So those are there, we need to refer to them. Also in the binder is a copy of the grammar request.
I got it memorized.
So on top, these are stapled together at the bottom, but on top is the request that Sam submitted, and underneath that is the one that Jerry submitted. Behind that, you'll find Colleen's response to Sam's request, and then Sam's appeal to the city and David Bunker's response. Also in here, in case we want to refer to them, are the 2 previous decisions that the State Records Committee made in association with Ken Comar's request in the past, and then a retention schedule for email so that you can see the state guidelines about email retention. So these are here just because I thought in case we want to refer to them. And I brought all these markers in case anyone wants one to mark things up. Do you want to pass them around, and if someone wants one to mark their papers so we can, you can easily refer to them, then you can do that. So, the first thing I want to do then is to kind of dissect this grandma request. So, it says that, maybe I'll let Sam express what it says.
Well, I think somebody ought to just read it. I mean, I can tell you my opinion of it, but you know what, a legal document is a legal document.
Okay, so, who wants to read it? Jenny?
Want me to read it?
Yep.
To whom it may concern, in the interest of ongoing news reporting of various issues facing Cedar Hills residents and city government, we grandma request the following public information. Please provide all city business-related email and text records not previously permanently posted on the city website from whatever source, including but not limited to city and/or personal email and text accounts from April 1st, 2012 to present as normally maintained. Do you want me to say the code as well? 63G-2-2032A. As legally required at the office of the recorder, 63G-2-2032A, between any and/or all of the following individuals before, after, or during their term of Cedar Hills public employee, and allow for the possibility of electronic copies of some or all to portable external storage device or disk free of charge for our purposes of publication or broadcast to the general public, 63G-2-2044, in the public interest. Mayors, city managers, city recorders, golf course managers, Gretchen and Greg Gordon, and former Mayor Brad Sears. We would be willing to pay up to 3 hours of fees to be $29 per hour as per a similar but larger grammar request for emails estimate of 2012 provided by then 20-year veteran city recorder Kim Hollander prior to her so-called resignation. Thank you in advance for your help to promote the public's right of easy and reasonable access to unrestricted public records, 63G-2-1023A.
Okay.
All right, now since you asked me to respond, I thought I'd just have that read first and then make a couple of comments. We only ask for business email and business records.
Okay.
We do specify personal accounts and text services for those records because if those records have not been transmitted to the city by law, and if an individual has done city business that's not accounted for and in control of the city by record, that becomes of great concern.
Okay.
Secondarily, texts were requested because somebody can send a document via text these days fairly easily. And so the whole idea was, and I don't know if I should have put like gold plates and tablets and brass plates and things, but the goal was to capture records that may not be in the city's control. The reason for that, from what I understand in the past, especially with the mayor, there was records that he had on a personal account that were not in the city's control. And so that's the reason that that request is written that way. But I repeat, it only asks for city business
Okay, so
records.
you're making it clear that anything on a personal account or a text message, you're not asking for it if it isn't a discussion of city business.
Correct.
Okay. Now, for my benefit, I don't know who these people are, and I'd like to go to the grease board and say, who's the mayor? Does that mean Gary?
Well, and we use those titles on purpose because, as you know, it's kind of like musical chairs. And as a result, there's multiple people involved. For example, the recorder that's named in the request is not the recorder now.
Okay.
The mayor that's by name is not the mayor now. So we mentioned the mayor and then by name Brad Sears. So what I'm saying is there's, on purpose, positions, not individuals, in an effort. We're not after individuals or personal. We're after the business done as city employees of record.
Okay. So, how many people does this involve? I thought it would be a good exercise to put names by these positions.
And I would say let's have the recorder record that for us.
If it's for the entire period of 2 years,
Yeah,
that would be 11 people.
11 different people
Yes.
for different time periods.
Well, from April 1st, 2012 to the present, that would be 11 people.
Okay. Do you mind if we put their names down?
Sure.
It must be Gary, right?
Gary Gigi?
Okay.
Eric Richardson.
And you might just put mayor by that.
All right.
And I'm just trying to clarify so it's clear. If it's on the board, that makes sense to blind
Okay,
people
so
like
those
me.
are mayor. Okay, Now
David
next.
Bunker?
David Bunker.
Conrad Hildebrand.
And then put city manager.
Okay. City manager, okay.
So on city recorder, Kim Hollandrake. Colleen Mulvey,
How do you spell?
HOLINDRAKE. Colleen Mulvey. So that would be recorder.
Okay,
Golf course manager, Jim Madsen. And Wade Doyle.
W-A-Y-D-E,
W-A-D-E, sorry,
that's okay.
D-E, and then D-O-Y-L-E.
Okay,
And then Greg and Gretchen Gordon,
to the goal.
those are the
No.
golf, yeah.
Those are golf, the Gordons are not.
Right.
Sorry.
And
So
then Greg
Greg-
and Gretchen Gordon, who are Greg and Gretchen Gordon.
And Gretchen Gordon,
Uh-huh. And they are both employees of the city.
We identify their positions?
yes, please.
Greg Gordon is the recreation director.
Okay,
Gretchen Gordon is an executive assistant
Two?
to me, to the city manager.
okay.
And then we have Mayor Brad Sears, former Mayor Brad Sears.
And he's not a city employee, right?
He's not a city employee.
Nor was he ever mayor during,
During this time?
since April 1st of 2012.
Okay,
So why is he on the list?
Interactions he's had with the city.
all right.
Well,
So,
let's ask the next question if we're gonna say about the list, why is he not the mayor?
well, we are talking about the request, so. Well,
Who
that's,
is this Brad Sears? I mean, why is he on there? If he wasn't the mayor during that time? Is he just a private citizen?
He's a private citizen, he's a resident.
okay.
So we're asking for private citizens?
No,
No.
let's understand, he was the mayor.
He was the
Let's answer
mayor
why
at
he's
the
not.
time the golf course came into existence.
Okay, this is what I want to do. I want to see what it would take to answer this request. So if it's government business, it's a government record. We all agree, right? So if Brad Sears has communication about city business with Gary, and it's in Gary's email account, it would be a government record, right?
That's right.
And
Well,
that's-
hold on, it'd be a government record if you communicated with Gary about government business, even if Gary doesn't have a copy of it, it's in Brad Sears' personal email.
I don't think so.
Why? What if it's city business that's never been properly transmitted to the city?
If it's not a city, if Brad Sears is not a city employee, then city business on his personal email is not a government record.
What if Gary deleted it, but it's on Brad Sears' personal email, but it's city business?
It's out of reach.
I don't think so.
You think so?
No.
My understanding is that state code allows for municipalities to subpoena any record from anyone.
Okay, but
that's
that's
a-
not in
court.
response to a grammar request.
I'm just saying, they have authority to gather records they don't have, if they don't have them, and if they choose to want to have them.
Okay.
You have to go to court for that, you cannot do something.
So we're going to limit this to a discussion of the grandma request.
Right.
So, the way I understand it, we would take those people who are city employees and query both their business account, do they all have business accounts, city accounts? We would query their city accounts for each other person on the list, right? And then, I'm sure they all must have personal email accounts. And if they're doing city business on their personal email account based on the State Records Committee decision earlier, they would forward those to the city, and you would count them as government records, yes.
You said to search through their emails for records addressed to someone else on the list, but I believe the request is for all of their emails, period, not just emails to someone else on the list. Is it between those individuals or all
It
records?
is city business in all their emails.
Because that's why we're having this discussion
That's why I
to
wanted to-
understand exactly what
Yeah,
this is.
so the account is not important, the city business is important. And
Right.
by reality, it should be transmitted to the city and under the city's control. The problem is in the past that has not happened, and thus the concern.
Okay, so I just want to make clear that I understood this request to be only email between these people.
That is correct.
So if Gary has, Jenny, you're not on the list.
I'm not on the list.
So Gary's communication with you is not being requested.
Correct.
Sure it is.
Council
No, it is
members aren't
not.
on the
No, it
list.
isn't. No, it
Hold on. Gary's city business is being requested
Between,
It says
between those individuals.
between the individuals listed.
Only between the individuals
Only
listed.
between the individuals listed.
Right, so Gary's communication with Daniel is not being requested.
Right.
Only his communication with other people on the list. And that's why Brad Sears is on the list, is because any of the people who are city employees who have communication with Brad Sears about city business during this time frame, that would qualify.
That's exactly right.
That's right.
Okay?
Exactly right.
So let me just say something,
Yes.
if I may, which is that the reason that Brad Sears' email is hard to do is it's probably unconstitutional in order to compel a private citizen to provide all of their private emails. But let's
No
just
one's asked for all the private emails.
but let's just for argument's sake say that
Okay.
Brad Sears emailed me, which he probably does, I don't know, 3 or 4 times a year.
Uh-huh.
It's on my email account, and so Sam had said, what if I deleted it? Okay, what if I did? It's on the city server's email. So, you know, we have a process whereby we keep emails for a year and then we
Uh-huh.
delete them.
Mhm.
But, so you're welcome to all my emails, every single one of them. And so if Brad Sears did happen to email me, you're welcome to take a look at that. But that's part of the problem with this grandma request. The city has always been 100% willing to provide all of the grandma requested information to the extent that we're able to do so. When you ask for all personal emails from a private citizen, we cannot do that.
Okay.
And for emails that are, you know, longer than 1 year, we cannot do that. But anything else, we're happy to do. But another thing that we should take notice of is that we have not received payment from Mr. Bushman and Mr. Alders.
That's
No,
false.
that's not- No, Mr. Bushman paid yesterday.
Okay, then he did. As of a couple of days ago, we have not received payment from,
Okay, but let's be clear though, I had a deadline and the payment was submitted before the deadline. Is there an issue with that?
Let's say, can we say these till later?
Sure, I'm just saying I filed the payment before the,
if that's the case, I didn't know about that, that's fine. We haven't received payment from Mr. Derringer, is that correct?
Correct.
And we have not received payment from the Herald. So,
Right.
and the reason that Mr. Derringer's and Mr. Bushman's cost is so little is because the Herald was willing to pay $900 of the compilation cost. So that's important because when you're talking about a grandma request, they're not free. So if Mr. Cromar wants a grammar request, then who pays for it? You, the citizens, do. Because there's a cost of compiling a grammar request, which is relatively small compared to the legal review. So if we compile the grammar request, then it's gonna cost
Let's come back to
roughly
the subject.
$1,000.
That's right.
But if you do the legal review, that's $10,000 of your taxpayer money that's being spent to do that.
Okay, let's come back to the core
I
issue.
just, I want to have a discussion of fees.
I do too. Go ahead.
So, but first I want to clear up exactly what we're asking for. So, we're going to say that if there's city business on private email accounts, that the employee will forward that to the city so that,
No, that's not good enough.
okay,
And the reason it's not good enough is that wasn't done before, that's the reason this is an issue. And there's no guarantee that that's happening now.
Rosemary?
yes,
I think it would be beneficial for us to explain why that was the case.
okay.
And Eric, I don't know if you want to take that, or David, or who you want to take that. I'm
Okay.
happy to.
My idea is to get everything clear about the request and then move on to problems with the request, your problems with the request. So is there any question from anyone about what is requested?
It says that they asked for a request from April 2012, and now they're saying that they delete them. So while people are asking for a grammar request and they're trying to have an agreement, are they deleting them as they go along, even though they requested it a long time ago? So it's been 2 years, so have they been deleting these emails, even though they've been requested probably a year ago?
Okay.
Because, you know, it sounds unfair to say that we can do this deletion even though we're not giving you the emails at the time.
You know, that is a really good question.
That's a good
And we
one.
do have a
Let's have the
procedure.
recorder answer the question.
Well, first, is there any questions about the request, what it is? Yes, Jerry?
Maybe I misunderstood. The mayor talked about Brad Sears emailing him a few times during the year. Now, if those are not city business, we don't want them.
That's correct.
If they're just personal emails, we're not after them. Only those that constitute city business.
The problem is that the way that you've written your grammar request says one thing. What you're asking is an entirely different
I'm
thing.
sorry, but it does not say, and I thought we were doing this. We say all city business related email and text records. That is it. And then there's a comma, which when somebody made a quote, they didn't put the comma in, and it says from whatever source. And so it's still only city business related email and text records, period.
Okay, so,
We don't want personal emails.
yes,
Can I make a thought here? I would like to hear from Colleen, because I think that she's the person that would fulfill the request, is that correct?
Correct.
So I think
Yes.
it should be the appropriate person then to talk about if she understands what we're asking for.
all right.
And if she does, then of course our next goal will be talking about fulfilling it, which again would be in her court, I would think.
Okay.
She's certified for that.
Eric had his hand raised and has a comment.
Yeah, yes, it only asks for city business, the city understands that. But it asks for emails about city business from the personal email account of Brad Sears. He's not affiliated with the city. And so, to the extent the city has an email from Brad Sears, I mean the city, the mayor or the golf course manager, you can have access to that. But the city, you cannot get access to someone's personal email account that is a private citizen through the Grandma Act. Even if Mr. Sears has if he's retained an email that he sent to the city can't invade his private account and go get that. If the city has a record of it, the city will give that. But the city can't go invade. And this clearly asks for records from Mr. Sears' personal account. He doesn't have a business account with the city.
Okay.
And it asks for records on personal accounts. That's the only place you could get an email from Mr. Sears is from his personal account, they didn't have a city.
Okay, so I think we're going to all agree that we understand that we're not asking for any email from Mr. Sears' personal account. Is that fair?
If Mr. Sears has emailed any of these other person's name, then it's on their account.
That's correct.
And- And so we don't need to go look at his at all.
That's correct.
Clarifying point though.
We don't want to.
Should the city have destroyed its records from, as they say, and Mr. Sears has it, they can certainly ask for him to provide a copy. He can certainly refuse, and they can certainly report that he has refused. There is a professional process to this, and it's a matter of, if we don't have the records, says the city, we will tell you that. That's what they should just tell us, rather than have the Daily Herald or individuals change their request to not include the things that they've requested. The city should simply say, here's what we've got, here's what we don't have, and professionally provide it or not.
Okay.
And if Mr. Sears is not willing to provide documents that the city has already deleted, then they can simply ask him for copies, and if he doesn't want to provide them, they have the opportunity to subpoena should they choose to. If they don't want to, they can say that too.
Okay.
So we think that there's important information that may have been deleted by the city, and we're hoping to get access to important city business. That is the point.
Okay.
And I would propose an affidavit if we wanted to get rid of all the discussions of personal accounts and what might be stored there as well. A simple affidavit can solve all that and take all those complications out of the mix and can provide a greater comfort level for the residents of Cedar Hills and the public at large.
Okay, so as part of this request, you're suggesting that the city ask all of these employees, but not Brad Sears?
So they can ask Brett.
They can ask, and they can report back or not, whatever they
But
want to do.
I would maintain that Brad Sears' email and his personal account is. So I think you're suggesting.
So it's not part of my legal request. I'm saying when I get back a denial and I appeal that denial and they get back a partial denial, and then they seem to be having trouble fulfilling this request, I'm merely proposing an option for solutions.
Okay.
So is it part of my request? No. Is it a good faith proposal? Certainly.
Okay. So are there any questions about the request and what's being asked for? Do you understand, Colleen? Is there any questions you have about how to interpret this request?
No.
Gary?
I think we understand the request, and that's why I said
Okay.
that we understood what they wrote. What they're asking is different than that, and that's why we couldn't comply either way. Now, interestingly, the Herald provided the exact same, even including the misspellings, grammar request. We sat down with them. They clearly understood very quickly the problems with the grammar request. They narrowed their focus, and then we're happy to comply
You have
with
to leave a
that.
question now, get yourself again.
I couldn't hear what he said.
I think I was looking to Gary. I asked Gary a question, but I asked Colleen as well.
And the reason this is important is really, let's talk a little bit about how grammar requests are to be filed and fulfilled. When you file a grammar request, is it appropriate for a city to say, hey, sit down with me, let's talk about changing what you've asked for, let's talk about having you narrow what you're asking for and redo what you've done, citizen, we'll help you do that? Or is it appropriate for them to simply fulfill what they can? And I get if there's things that need to be redacted or somehow, because of classified information or whatever the case may be, not delivering those records, I get that. But it's a simple, you know what, reply and fulfill what you can and appropriately justify legally, if you will, what you can't. That's the professional reply. It's not a let's sit down at the table and let's coach you through narrowing your request, is it?
No,
if I Rosemary, I asked you.
You asked me?
Yes.
I would answer that by saying that it would be appropriate if the city is trying to clarify what is being asked for. If they don't understand the request and they want clarification, then it would be appropriate for them to speak to whomever made the request to try to understand. Does that make sense?
Yes, and they spoke to the Herald, and the Herald reduced what they're asking for.
Do you represent the Herald? No? Is there anyone here who does?
Kathy
represent?
does.
I'm
You're-
just here as an observer.
Okay, okay. Fair enough.
But I would say this, though, the Herald has narrowed their request, I have not.
Okay,
And I guess the discussion is about
Your-
my request and the denial and partial denial that I received, not about how they've narrowed the request for somebody else.
okay, let's not talk about the Herald anymore. Okay, so now, if we all understand the request, let's talk about the problems with the request, or maybe even before that, what do you think? I want to talk about the problems with the request as the city sees it, but, yeah, let's go there. So, what, and I want to list the issues, and then we can talk about them one at a time. Does that sound good?
Sure.
Okay, what are the issues with with fulfilling this request? City in particular.
Yeah, there are several, one of which we have
Why
identified.
should the recorder be answering this? She's the one to fulfill the request.
I want to hear from all of the city.
I appreciate Mr. Bushman wanting to control this, but, you know, I think we'll let whoever in the city wants
I
to
want to hear from
respond.
everyone in the city.
Yeah, I agree. And so, it may be multiple people that will respond to this. So, one of the issues or problems that we have fulfilling the request was that, and we identified that, Mr. Sears is a private individual.
Okay,
Second question comes from what Mrs. McPherson asked about the deletion of emails. And so, we've dealt with multiple grammar requests from Mr. Cromwell over the years.
Uh-huh.
He had one that expired in December of last year, isn't that correct, Eric?
Yes.
So, when we receive a grammar request, Wanda, you'll be happy to know, we stop deleting at that point until that grammar request expires or is resolved. So now we have a grammar request that's dated April the 8th, 2014. So once we receive a grammar request, then we tell everyone that's on that list to not delete anything that would fall within that time period. So I think your question was, could we just go along and prolong this process and delete emails all the way along? Because we typically delete them at the end of every month, so there's a rolling 12-month period, but we don't do that once we have a grammar request. So there's the 1 year period where they're going back to April 2012. That's obviously a problem because we're in June of 2014. So the furthest we could go back would be April of 2013.
So they're deleted now.
What's that?
They're all deleted in 2012.
Prior to that period, they should be. Now,
Are
if
they?
they're,
Are they deleted?
I would assume they are, but if you'll let me
Would
explain.
the county recorder be able to tell us if they're deleted or not?
The
So
city
let's
recorder.
get her.
Well,
City recorder, I mean.
how about if they
She's
just let
the
me
county recorder, sorry.
answer the question, and then I think that it'll be resolved. So there's a policy of deleting the emails after 1 year's period of time. However, if there is someone who feels like there's an email that is so important that they want to keep it, then they can print it out in hard copy and put it in a file. So of the, over 2 years that I've been an elected official for Cedar Hills, there has not been one email that is so important that I had to print it out and keep it. Now, I can't speak for the rest of the elected officials, but, any documents that we have involving contracts, they're generally, I sign those in hard copy, I have to sign them. So all of those things we have. So there's the time period, there's the private individual. You also are asking for emails between a husband and a wife. Now, there could be some private emails, and I understand there says all business-related emails.
Right.
But they'll still have to be redacted, and so we're gonna have an argument about whether we should redact or not. Because I think that Mr. Cromer and Mr. Bushman and Mr. Derringer want all of the raw data before it's been redacted.
Well, hold on. That would be a matter of expense and a judgment call in terms of you guys. And if you want to reduce the expense, a simple query of email and a data dump of that is a whole lot easier and simpler and less expensive for the city. And that's, the recorder judgment on that. She's the one to fulfill the request.
No, that's your interpretation. And so The grandma law specifically punishes people equally for disclosing more information as it does for not enough. So if any of you had emailed me and you happen to have your phone number on it, or your address, or any personal information, do you want the world to know that? A lot of people don't.
Can I interrupt for 1 second?
Yeah, go ahead.
In your package where it has the grandma law, pages 19 through 29 detail all of the private, controlled, and protected records for redaction. So you can look through those 10 pages from the state that tells you what is considered private, what is considered controlled, and what is considered protected.
So I think there's a basic misunderstanding of the grandma law. And the reason I say it's a basic misunderstanding is because Mr. Cromar knows all this information. We've been to the grandma process before. We've gone to the records committee before, and the records committee unanimously told the city that we are operating accurately in every single instance. Yet the very next day, Mr. Cromar claims victory when there was really none to be had. They said that we redacted correctly in every instance. They said that Mr. Cromar had to pay for emails because it wasn't in the public interest. It was to further his political endeavors. So none of the things we're discussing tonight really is new information. It's been explained to Mr. Cromar at length at least a dozen times. He knows what the law says, yet he continues to refuse what the law has been told to him in order to further stir the pot.
So let's move back to the problems with answering the request.
Okay?
And you mentioned that one problem was Brad Sears. Have we cleared that up?
I think we have.
We have cleared that up.
He's a private citizen.
And we are not, okay, so that's,
But also, any emails that may have come to the city, you're gonna have those anyways. So if Brad Sears had sent an email to me or anyone else that's on this list, you're going to get Brad Sears emails.
Thank you for making our
That's
point.
right.
That is our point.
that's right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you, that's our point.
Well, then why'd you include him?
Well, you can fulfill the request, you can ask Brad Sears if you choose, you can subpoena records if you choose, or you can say we can't fulfill that, that's your prerogative.
Well, if you're
What we're
asking
gonna
me,
say.
yeah, if you're asking me to
I'm saying that to
subpoena,
the recorder.
if you're asking me to subpoena Brad Sears' emails,
Not it.
We're not asking you to do that, we're merely
Right.
saying
I'm
that's
saying
an
that's
option.
that's an option you have.
You have,
All right.
but it's really an option the city recorder has.
All right, David,
Dan.
Daniel, thank
Yes,
you.
I just want to clarify something. So, Mayor, you asked why was Brad Sears' names included on the record? I believe, if I understand the request properly, his name is on the record because they want any emails that are from Brad Sears or to Brad Sears that are sitting on a city email account.
That's right.
So they had to name
Or
him
in
as
the
somebody
private
who would
accounts.
appear in the.
No,
I'm sorry,
in the
this is
private accounts
my
of
train
those
of
who
thought,
we
but
have
I've
control.
interrupted, so I'm just gonna kindly ask Mr. Bushman if he would not interrupt when I'm talking. It makes it difficult to keep track of my train of thought.
Okay,
He's simply asking for emails that are to or from Brad Sears. And
Yeah.
so if you do a search on a city employee's email account,
you're gonna find
you
it.
go into the to address and say, is this to Brad Sears? Or in the from address, is this from Brad Sears? You'll find it on a city email account. So that's why he's listed on the request. I think
Yeah.
that's appropriate.
So, and
As
we're
long as
in-
we agree, there's no belief or expectation that there would be private emails from Brad Sears' personal email account that we're going to be searching for.
Yeah.
Thank you.
that
I
are
think
involved.
we already
that's right.
resolved that.
we resolved that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so
Agreed,
then,
agreed, but I want to add one thing though.
okay,
When we say that the emails are to or from Brad Sears and they're on a business account, as Mr. Savala said, we're also talking about individual accounts as well that relate to business email.
okay.
So let's not narrow it to just the city business accounts.
You're talking about city business on,
Any
say,
city employee's
Any city
personal
employee's
account.
say one of those
account and
people's
or
personal
text.
account that they forward to the city.
And or text.
Okay, we started talking about the retention, so let's finish that and see if we can come to a resolution about the retention. Daniel?
I'll save that until after we're done dealing with retention schedule.
Okay,
Because this request asks for records from April 1st, 2012.
that's
So we need
correct.
to address that period as whether those
We're
records
gonna
are in the
address
city's.
the time period. So in the packet, I gave you this retention schedule. And this is the state general retention schedule. So how it works is if cities, or cities have their own retention, if cities do not have their own retention schedules, then they follow the state schedule. So in the past, we've had 2 retention schedules. One is executive correspondence, and that's incoming and outgoing business-related correspondence that, actually, I have a problem with these retention
I'm not sure
schedules.
we have one.
You don't have one, it's one sheet and it's on the back, clear at the back.
The back of the.
It says Schedule 1 Administrative Records at the top.
Right. You didn't get one.
You can use mine if you like. I'm just that kind of cheerful helper.
Is this the municipal schedule or is this the state schedule?
This is the state, the problem is that last month we changed the general schedule and it includes everybody, municipality, state government, everybody. And so the new schedule is posted and that's what this is. But the State Records Committee had a discussion about the administrative correspondence last month because we proposed extending it to 3 years. And the Attorney General's office came back and said we think 7 years is more appropriate. And so.
I would say since the IRS makes me keep 7 years, that sounds reasonable.
Right. So anyway, the Records Committee is meeting again in the morning and they're going to either approve this 7 years or something different. I don't know what they'll do, but at least the general retentions for the transitory correspondence and the executive correspondence were passed last month, and what used to be is not on the website, and this is what's there now. So I want to say that prior to last month, the general schedules were only, there were only 2 things. There were executive correspondence, which is permanent, and that usually includes only the mayor or really important stuff. And then all the rest of it was until administrative need ends, which gives cities the opportunity to choose how long they feel they need to keep the records. And so Cedar Hills has chosen 1 year. And if the new schedule gets passed, it'll turn to 7 years, or else they'll have to make their own ordinance and decide that it's still 1 year, which they can do.
Might I make another comment?
Yes?
I agree with everything you said. I would submit though that now that records can be kept really literally in a tiny space, digitally speaking, records for, I mean, until the cows come home, you can keep and retain records. I guess in the interest of transparency, what's the benefit of saying, hey, we just lock it down to 1 year and they're gone? What's the value in that from a transparency point of view, or for a forward-thinking digital point of view? I don't really understand the value.
That is a records management question, and I don't know if I want to go there, but Daniel?
I'm happy to provide some input on that.
All right.
There's a balance to be made here, which is that we're weighing the benefits of transparency, which I strongly agree with, versus cost to taxpayers.
Right.
And so if there are 7 years of records in storage for things like email, then when someone requests 7 years of grammar records, the cost to the city can be quite large. We've already seen costs of $1,000 for just the collection process for this grammar request. We've seen costs exceeding tens of thousands of dollars for previous requests for legal review. For 7 years, you're going to multiply that by 7. So it really is a conversation we need to have with residents. If it came to me as a city council member to make an ordinance regarding how long our retention requests would be, I would go to citizens and say, how long would you like us to keep them, keeping in mind that that will cost you quite a bit of money if someone requests a large volume of records.
Yes, but.
You know, I'm just a basic everyday citizen. And I deal a lot with digital media, tons of it. And I have media from 20 years ago. And technology today will allow us to put years of this kind of stuff on a Blu-ray disc. You can come to me and you can ask for every one of these individuals, and within an hour, I will have you every last bit of information according to these individuals off of a simple Blu-ray disc. So I get really confused when I hear it's a big cost, when I myself know how to manage this kind of data and deliver it like that. So I'm just confused.
I can clarify.
As a citizen, I put that out there because it seems a conflict of what I understand.
Okay, I want to hear from you and then you did.
Simply, I think I'm just gonna ask the same question, which is, can you clarify this pricing structure? That seems completely outrageous.
Yes, I can provide some of what you want.
I
I
wanna-
think the pricing can be done by someone else who knows more than I do.
Yes.
But, forgetting your name, Mr. McPherson, is that right? The storage costs, you're right, are extremely small for digital data. What we're talking about here in terms of costs are compilation costs. So let's imagine, for example, that someone asks a grammar request for all of the records related to the golf course, all emails related to the golf course. That would require a search that could involve a number of search terms. It might be golf course, clubhouse, greens, divots. I mean, I can imagine the number of keywords that would be required, right? So there is time to search is part of that component. There is time to then take all those records out of whatever repository that is, whether it's a Blu-ray disc or a hard drive, whatever that is, and copy them to another place so that we can transmit them to the grammar requester. And then there is the bulk of the cost, which is the redaction costs. Somebody actually has to read through every one of those emails. So yes, it is really simple to store 7 years of email in a very compact space, but I would invite you to try to read through 7 years of emails and follow this very long list of private and protected information and have to go through and redact, whether electronically or manually, that information. That is a very time-consuming process. I've seen the stacks of paper involved in this process, and they're quite high.
Whenever there's a
It's not a small thing that you're asking.
whenever
I'm
there's a
sorry.
grandma request, the compilation is a fraction of what the legal review cost is. So just like Daniel said, is that data storage is really easily done, Curtis. You and I know that. So you can store things in a really small disk, and you can actually search it pretty easily. But when you're doing the compilation and the legal review, that's when it gets really expensive. So every time that there's a grammar request from Mr. Cromar, the legal review tends to be at least $10,000 or more of your taxpayer money.
Okay,
Now,
I want to
is it
stop right
required
here.
to always legally review everything if there's a person who is appointed to be able to do that within the internal structure of the city?
She does that first anyway. She and Mr. Bunker are going to look at all of that information first. And then, but they're not attorneys, and so they need to have Mr. Johnson or one of his staff make sure that everything's been done correctly.
So is this a standard operation with all cities and states that an attorney always looks through this information then?
I want to have this discussion, but I kind of want to finish what we started.
Yes.
Okay, so we were talking about retention. And the grammar request is for the email from 2012, April, to the present day. But really, the grammar request is for all the email that you have, right? In those dates. So you cannot provide what you don't have.
Correct.
Okay.
And I would make a clarification though, that if it's printed out, it's still an email.
Okay. How do you respond to that, Colleen?
If it's printed out, it is a document.
Yeah.
And
No. It's
and
an email.
it's part of that grammar request.
It is part of the
Agreed.
It
grammar
came from a
request.
form of an email.
Right, so you agree?
We
with
do.
him?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Very good. How
No,
about you?
that's incorrect. If, it's not in the format of an email, if it's been deleted in the format of an email, and even though it's been printed out and placed in a different file, that's not considered an email anymore. It's a record, and that's maybe how it was originally received, but it's now a paper file that is somewhere else.
Okay, Eric, that the question is really, is that part of his request?
No,
Yes, it is.
no.
Yes, it is, and I would say it's still an email. Just because we take something
Okay.
and we change the format of that something, then we claim it's not an email anymore. Then I mean, at some point I might have to ask for gold plates and brass plates and papyrus and scrolls, and I might have to, I mean, at what point can we say, yeah, you know, we printed it all out, we don't have any emails, guys?
Well, I guess.
At some point, it's still an email. It still has a to and from, and unless they've
Right.
deleted that part and printed out only the document correspondence. But either way, the attempt here is to change it from email reality to something different.
Okay, so it doesn't
And
matter.
it was email in its correspondence.
It doesn't matter so much whether it's defined as an email or a document. What matters is that we agree on what has been requested, right?
As long as we're not gonna parse that to try to fulfill the request, sure.
Right, but Gary and Colleen agree that they understand that if it's been printed out, you're still asking for it.
Well, and I think what Mr. Johnson was saying is that if the, and I don't want to speak for you, Eric, but if it says in their grammar request, and really that's what we have to go on, is because by not fulfilling it how they have written it, we fear that they are the exact ones who will inflict punishment on us for not obeying their grammar request to the letter of the law. So we are not going to get in the habit of trying to interpret what it is that they're saying now, but what their grammar request actually says. So if their grammar request said, and I'll just use this one, if it said something like, from April 1st, 2012 to the present, asking for the emails. However, any emails, because they know that any emails are really just available from April 2013 at this point. They already know that. And so if they're asking for April 1st, 2012, then they should specify and say, any emails that were printed out and put in hard copy into a file during that time period that they're asking for. Because the way that their grammar request is written is they're asking for all emails from April 1st, 2012 to the present, where we don't keep emails. Anything that's been printed out, I don't have a problem with giving them any emails that have been printed out and put into a file. They're welcome to it.
Okay,
So, but that's not how they wrote their grammar request.
all right, I propose.
And I would say digitally speaking in today's society, I don't mean to be offensive, but I'm saying who in their right mind would print things to paper? That's already in digital form. There's companies putting things into digital form from paper, not the other way around these days.
Well, I appreciate
That's
that.
what I'm saying is.
But that's beside the point.
It is.
No, what is on target for the point is, they're still emails, just because we changed the medium in which they're documented, it's still an email.
We're not going to talk about whether it's an email or not, but we're going to decide that you are requesting it, right?
Agreed.
You're saying it
Yes.
is normally maintained, and I don't know how they normally maintain them. I get the impression today that some of them are normally maintained in paper form once the year is gone. Or maybe you
If
do
they're-
it before that, I don't know, but in whatever form they are maintaining it. If they don't have them, you're right, we can't get them.
Yes.
But I guess I'm saying that we didn't ask for brass plates either.
Okay.
And I'm not trying to
Alright.
be rude, but I'm trying to make a point that how many of you in this room would think, hey, I better ask for paper copies because they're gonna take digital stuff, put it into paper and nuke the digital. And so therefore I better make sure to dot that I and cross that T. The intent of the email request is there. And I kind of feel like in transparency, we didn't even know that these were stored in print. And so I guess what I'm saying is I'm not so sure that that should be used against us. It's obvious what we're asking for. And I'm not sure if this is an attempt to dodge that, but it certainly doesn't comfort me from a transparency level.
Okay, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 hands in that order.
Yes. I don't know why 1 year of retention was decided upon, and I'm not sure I understand if you're saying that they're gonna make 7 years retention a policy. But I have to
That's
say,
right.
as a private citizen, because of what, since I've lived here, Cedar Hills has been through, I have a lack of trust with city officials from the beginning of the golf course through many different issues. So my preference as a citizen is that it go longer than 1 year of retention because I have a lack of trust of decisions, and I would like to be able to know that. I do not know you well enough, any of you, to be able to say, I don't trust you. But there were issues for me in the past, clear back when I moved here, on those trust issues, and that's why I would say, please consider more than 1 year of retention on your records. Because we need to be able to say, I see you are trustworthy, and I consider that you are making those decisions for me based on that trust. And I want to be able to see it be earned where it was not for me as a private citizen in the past. That's why I would encourage more than 1 year of retention.
Thank you.
I'm kind of like Ronald Reagan, I want to trust but verify, you know?
I forgot your first
Okay,
name.
Wanda? So I agree with that. I think that's a good point, because transparency needs to be just available, I think. Why are we having to request something to be transparent? Why aren't we just available to the citizens to have, a look at what's going on when it's just, to be available? And if they have a city email, why do we have to babysit their email with personal things on it? If they choose to use it for personal items, then that's the risk they take. If they want to put their personal things on it, then we can't babysit that. That's not something you need to do or us. They just have to say, well, I use it for that, I guess I have to submit it.
Okay.
That's a business email, not a babysitting email.
If it's a personal email, it's not responsive to their request because they only ask for business email.
Well, what I'm saying is, if they use their business account as a personal, use it for personal items or whatever they want to use it for, then they're using that as a city available information. I mean, why would we have to babysit that?
Are you talking about Gretchen and Greg Gordon that are married?
Well, we all can have personal email.
Yeah.
That's a very simple thing to do.
Yeah.
That's my understanding.
And I know Gretchen, that's my
Yeah.
day one, but I respect that. However, what I'm saying is, I'm not pointing at them, I'm saying they have a job, they're at the city, and if they have a business email, then use that for business, and then they
I
can
agree.
use a personal email.
I don't know of anyone that uses it for personal reasons, but Gretchen and Greg could have, their husband and wife, but I don't know of anyone that uses it for personal use.
Right.
Right, and I'm, Gretchen, I'm sure they have a personal email account.
When we say we don't know anybody that used it for personal use, I think, isn't Mr. Sears, isn't that kind of the issue that started this whole?
I think,
Didn't he do that, I think?
I don't know anything about that, but as far as this request is concerned, we resolved Mr. Sears' issue.
I understand, I'm just saying, when we say we don't know anybody that's done that, I think that's at the heart of this discussion, that we do, and that's why it's relevant.
In response to your comment, Sam, that isn't what I was gonna comment on, but what I was gonna, 2 years ago, and Mr. Marigigi says that it was unanimously in all issues in behalf of the city. That is absolutely patently incorrect.
No, it's
and you know
not.
it. And let me explain why. I didn't interrupt you when you said that, but I'm gonna explain that now. Judge Daniels sat on that committee of 7 and said he was disturbed that the city was not putting its email, city business email that was being kept on personal accounts, back to the city. And he made the motion ordering that happened. And you'll find in your packet that that's what it says. They unanimously decided that they had to gather those emails and provide them to Mr. Cromar and Cedar Hill Citizens for Responsible Government. You're doggone right, that was a big win. The only win you got was $766 collected, which was fine. It was, we could never get the explanation. Excuse me, sorry. I need to be careful. But the point is I don't understand why the city would spend 10, 30, 40, 50, whatever thousands of dollars to collect 766. So back to the point I was gonna make. That was just to clarify for you, Sam. This is from state code with regards to how records are kept. I'm sorry, it just moved on me.
Can I move to someone else while you're looking?
It'll take me just I think it'll take me just a moment, sorry. It's right here, This is 63G, Chapter 2, Section 201, and it's number 11. It says, a governmental agency may not use the physical form, electronic, or otherwise, in which a record is stored to deny or unreasonably hinder the right of a person to inspect and receive a copy of a record under this chapter. I would point out to you that you should be very disturbed as citizens, as you just now heard, that we keep our records electronically, but if we want something important, we change it to paper. But if you didn't ask for that, we're not going to give it. And you've got the attorney saying one thing, you've got the city and the recorder, or the mayor and the recorder saying something different. And I think that's a pretty significant issue because all legal advice is coming from the attorney. And all the posturing and all the letters that the mayor doesn't write, but he does sign. And though I wrote those drafts, spellings and misspellings included, they're not mine because I didn't sign them.
Your document's valid because you signed it, so are all the others. That's it, thank you.
Okay,
And my request doesn't have Ken Cromar in it, by the way.
okay. I want to keep on topic.
Well, because we're talking about my request, and I'm just saying.
I want to
Ken
keep on
Cromar's not
topic too,
mentioned.
but we should be able to address some of the things that Mr. Cromar just
Yes,
said. So,
okay. Jenny?
I actually took some notes because I'd like to answer some of the questions that were asked too. So on the 1 year, as Councilmember Zapala talked about, there is a cost associated with review and redaction from our employees.
What does
and-
redaction mean?
So the law tells us what is considered a private and controlled or protected. So somebody has to read through every email and redact or black out anything that is private, controlled, or protected.
Give some examples.
So we can't, so there's 10 pages that the state has given us of what is private, controlled, and protected. So anything in those 10 pages, we have to redact. We can't provide it, it's not a public document. So if that is in our email, which it is, if you read through this list, there's quite a bit of information that is not public, that has to be blacked out or redacted before it can be provided as a public document. So as Councilmember Zapala talked about, there is a high cost of doing that because it's very time consuming. And so I appreciate your concerns about your trust issues. And as Councilmember Zapala said, we have to talk to multiple residents because we have a ton of residents who contact us who are very angry that we've spent so much money reviewing and redacting these grammar requests. And so it is a balance between, because it's all tax dollars that we're using for this.
May I say that it's very intimidating when you say to me as a citizen, it costs you as a taxpayer a lot of money for us to do this. That has intimidated so many people I have talked to because they say, all these grant requests are costing me money, and you keep throwing that. I understand what you're telling me too, but that's also very intimidating to a taxpayer to make them want to say, okay, I don't want to pay more. I mean, I don't want to pay more for the golf course. I'm tired of that. I don't use it. I don't want to pay more for blah, 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 blah. So that's also a point I would say, please be very careful as city councilman that you don't keep throwing that back to us as citizens. People can't afford anything more, and that is very also intimidating. And I understand your problem. I hear it. I see it. But it also sounds like there's so much blacked out that is scary, because there was a lot blacked out in this city that was real darn scary.
Well,
Sorry.
and I don't know, when I'm talking about blacking out, I'm just talking about specifically what grandma law says is private, controlled, protected. So by law, we have to redact that. We can't provide it. It's illegal. And so we have to do that. And when it comes to cost, like I said, we have a lot of residents that are reaching out to us on cost. So I think that has to be something that residents are aware of. As far as why requesting the records instead of just having them available, again, it's because somebody has to redact them, and so they're not redacted until that request is made. Otherwise, we would have to hire more people just to read emails every day and redact them to make them available. Mayor Gee said that someone could print out an email. I just want to clarify that that's someone's prerogative, I guess. I've never printed out an email. I'm with
Neither have
Mr.
I.
Bushman. I prefer electronic, so I've never printed an email and saved it. So I think you were just saying that that's a prerogative that somebody
It
has.
definitely is. And like I said at the beginning, I've never had an email that was so important that I needed to print out and save.
And then the last thing is, we've talked a lot about the personal accounts. When I was first on the city council, up until that Mr. Cromar made his first grammar request for emails, none of the city council members from that time, but even when Mr. Cromar was on the council, nobody was issued a city email, didn't give access to the city server. So we got a city email account, but it automatically forwarded to our personal email account because we don't get a city computer and we didn't have access to the network. When Mr. Cromar made his request and that became a concern, we immediately agreed, let's fix it. So we had an IT person come in and change it so that way all of the city council members could then remotely access the server and obtain their city email addresses. And so now, instead of having it pushed through to our personal email address, which it no longer does, we have to log into the city server and review our email that way. But prior to that request, it had always been a push through because that's just the way the city was set up, which wasn't illegal. There's no law, I believe, Mr. Johnson, you can clarify that.
And
that
Jenny,
says-
I would say that's good, the city's moving in that direction. And I would say that's a good step in the right direction, and part of our goal
Can
would be.
I just finish, Mr. Bushman? Sorry.
Sure.
So I want to make that very clear that city business wasn't being done on personal email accounts because I was trying to hide anything, it's because I didn't have access to the city account, the city server. I do now, and so I don't have a need to get emails to my personal account. I'm fine looking through to see if I have anything, but it wasn't done on personal email accounts because we were trying to hide anything. It's because we didn't have access to the city server. And like I said, that was from every council until it went from the time email was invented until that grammar request.
Including when Mr. Cromer was on the council. So he operated under that same type of scenario.
Understand. So my proposal to resolve that would be an affidavit of Jenny saying, hey, I'm willing to certify that I have not put any business of the city on my personal account that has not been transmitted to the city, like which was done in the past, and she's willing to sign an affidavit of that. That would be completely a good option.
I most certainly would.
I'm fine with that too.
I want to just clarify one other thing. Ms. McPherson, I think is your name. So I just wanted to clarify, and I think Jenny touched on this issue. So you mentioned why personal information is being put on city accounts. Why would I use my city account for personal information? And I talked with Mr. Bunker just the other day and asked him, are city employees using their email accounts for both personal and city business? And the answer I got was no. I don't think our city employees are using their city accounts for personal business. When we say we have to redact personal information, it's not our own personal information. It's when a resident, such as yourself, would email us about an issue and say, can you please call me back at my phone number here? We have to redact the phone number of that resident because that is considered personal information of that resident, not of me.
So is that,
So-
so are they asking now?
It's sorry, it will stop in a second.
Okay.
So I guess is Mr. Bushman asking for that as a business email?
No, what he's asking for is all emails between these particular individuals.
Relating to the city business.
Wait a minute, sorry.
Right, so they're asking for emails between the individuals on the board
Right.
that are city business emails, right? But in those emails,
Hold on a second, you didn't hear.
okay,
They
so
want
in
to
those
make sure
emails,
that
for
those
example, could be an email from Mr. Bunker, our city manager, to Mr. Geeby, our mayor. Talking,
Let's just wait a minute.
I thought it was okay. So
That
for
was private
example,
information.
they're
Steve, do you have to turn off in there?
Not that there's no.
You can turn it off for this one.
That's what happens when you have a meeting at fire, so we're just lucky they're not super busy tonight.
That's private and personal information.
so for example,
There you go.
Mr.
They forgot to
Bunker,
redact.
our city manager, could have emailed Mr. Geeby, our mayor, about a third party, an employee of the city, on a personnel issue. It could be this particular employee is going to be out the next 2 weeks because of a broken leg. That's considered personal protected information. So, and there's, as Jenny was
It's a
saying,
lot.
a very long 10-page list. So that's the kind of information that we're going to have to go through and redact. It's not that we've improperly used our accounts or that I'm using my account for personal purposes, is that there is other parties that we may be talking about that we have to guard their privacy. Even if that's as simple as somebody sharing a phone number, we've got to black that out. And that takes time to go through each of the emails and read them and make sure that anything on this long list has been properly taken care of. If we don't follow that process, if we were to say, it would be great to put all our emails just instantly on a website, so perfect transparency, we'd be breaking the law, and we'd be liable for releasing that information against the law.
So before we go any further, I want to make sure that we have cleared up we cleared up the retention issue and what's being asked for. And then Sam asked about the personal accounts and asked if those employees who are city employees currently could sign an affidavit that they have either forwarded their business email to the city or that they don't have any city business on their personal accounts. Is that right, Sam?
Yeah, in essence, or that they haven't done any, or that they don't know of others doing so, et cetera, but sure.
Any problem with that?
No.
No, Eric?
I don't have a problem with that, but I wanted to circle back about the scope of the request. Emails, by definition, are electronic.
Correct.
Okay, and so, let me give you an example of where an email may be printed out and kept in a paper file. There is an email sent from Wade Doyle, the golf course manager, to David Bunker, the city manager, containing financial information. If that financial information is not captured elsewhere, the retention schedule on the finances is 7 years, not 1 year. And so that email would be printed out and put in the financial records file so that it's kept for the 7 years that financial records are supposed to be kept. Now, it will still be on the email account for at least a year, okay? But at the end of the year, in the electronic format, it would then be deleted, and the substance that is required to be kept for 7 years is kept in a paper file. Now, the reason I say this is important because it impacts the scope of the search for responsive records. Are we searching email, electronic records? Or do we now have to search every paper the city has to see if an email was once upon a time printed out and put in a paper file? Which is a much, much, much more extensive search. And the amount of money that we talked about in order to compile records is going to escalate.
Okay, I want Sam to answer that.
And I'm beginning to see a picture why the costs are so extravagant, and I'm questioning the sanity of taking an email and converting it to paper and deleting the digital. The whole world's trying to put things in digital form where it can be stored easily and inexpensively and searched and everything else, and we've simply intentionally taken away that ability. Then if somebody wants records, we're saying, golly, it's so hard to get them. I don't know, the term asinine comes to mind, but I don't really know what to say except for it seems very counterintuitive to modern record storing capabilities in an IT world. And I'm in the IT business, and I'm telling you, I don't know of any company that's designed to say, let's take all your data that's digital and let's convert it to tablets or papyrus or paper and then make the digital not available and then be concerned about, hey, how do we gather that and dispense that upon request? And the cost would be driven up substantially by doing that. I don't understand the sanity in doing that in the first place, but I would defer to Rosemary. She is a records expert for the state of Utah.
Well, do you want me to answer that, or I want?
He asked you a question.
I want, after I answer that question, then I'll go to you and then Daniel. I understand what Eric's saying, because if you have an email that contains financial records that goes with a set of other financial records, you want them together, because if it's over in an email account somewhere, it's lost from the record series that it goes with. Does that make sense?
True,
Yes.
but there's no need to destroy the electronic data. That can stay there too, is the point.
And there's no need to put it in paper make sure we organize it properly in filing cabinet D in the basement somewhere. There's ways to digitally put that in context, and a simple term would be an email thread. The point is, though, it's going from digital, searchable, available, accessible in a tiny form, to an unwieldy, expensive process here. What I'm saying is, it's not my request that's at issue here, it's how they're handling the records. And I would say there's digital solutions, and I would ask Daniel this, isn't there digital solutions that can put that in context and store that appropriately digitally? I would submit there is.
Daniel, and then, what was your name again?
Also Daniel.
Okay, Daniel, and then Daniel.
Other Daniel.
Well, what I want to clarify here is that Mr. Bushman is asking us to modify our current record retention policies as opposed to getting to an issue relating to fulfilling a current grammar request,
Right.
given our current record retention policies.
And
So
that's what
given that we have a
do.
limited amount of time here tonight, I would suggest we talk about fulfilling the grammar request given our current record retention policies. And if he
Yes.
would like to advise us or give us some insight as to how to improve our record retention policies, by all means, come to a public meeting and we can have that discussion.
Okay. Thank you, Daniel.
I was just gonna say, I think we've heard some very cogent and clear explanations of why the cost of researching and redacting this information would be astronomical, especially if you have to retain a lawyer to do that and put the final seal of approval. I don't think I've heard any explanation as to why there's any special cost for storing, other than if we keep it longer than a year, then someone might ask us for it, and then gosh, we might have all the costs of researching it. And isn't there some mechanism in place to prevent frivolous requests?
No, there's not.
Okay,
That's what we're dealing with. We're
Can we
dealing with
come-
requesters who make massive requests without any particular thing they're looking for. We've been told, we need all these records because we don't know what we're looking for. There might be something there we could find.
I think, this is the kind of stuff I work with. I'd be happy to help the city figure out a great way to move forward from now to the future of taking all this information and making it so simple that anybody could digitally access that and already have it redacted.
that's awesome.
But in the fulfilling, I agree with Daniel, that, you know what, fulfilling is important. I'm saying, in my denial, the partial denial, it says, Sam, you're welcome to submit your payment, but you're gonna drive the cost of the city to just extravagant levels. And I'm saying, maybe it's because they're putting it on paper, guys.
All right.
You know what I mean? Maybe that's the reason. And I'm suggesting, that's not my fault. I use the word asinine for a reason. I'm not really here to fix their policies as much as I am here to say, is it really me driving up the cost of the request? Because it's just a belligerent, crazy request? Or is it that we've made it virtually impossible to obtain that data?
I think Mr. Bushman is overstating the impact of paper records on our current grandma search costs. The costs that have been outlined to him, which far exceed the costs we're allowed to charge him, are relating to searching email records, which are indeed electronic. So leaving aside the question of whether records are put on paper or not, the current request asks for email, which are electronic records, and the search, the collecting, and the collating of those records, as well as the redaction of those records, that does come to a significant cost.
Okay,
And
I
they're
want to talk
suggesting
about,
paper printouts are not emails, though.
Before
I
you
disagree with that.
let's, you, what was your name
We're-
again?
Marlene,
Marlene.
we're drifting all over the place. I
Yes.
support what Mr. Zapata said, let's get to the issue,
Yeah.
not what we should do in the future.
That's good, a good suggestion, thank you. So we're going to rein this back in from advice to how you should manage your records in the future to how we're responding to this exact request. So we've dealt with the Brad Sears issue, the retention issue, what's being asked for, and I think we're clear on those things, and the affidavit for personal accounts. Is there any other issue specific to filling this request other than the separate issue of cost?
Text
Yes, there are
messages.
two.
Go ahead.
The first of which is the affidavit. I also do not have a problem signing an affidavit. What I have a problem with is a requester demanding an affidavit as a result of his request. I think that sets a precedent that anybody who now makes a request can say, oh, in addition to my request, I demand this affidavit too. I think that puts us in a tough situation every time a requester might ask for an affidavit.
We were suggesting
You're
that.
just asking for it?
We're just saying that might be an easy way to not have to go through personal email accounts. and
But they're not
things like
asking for
that.
personal email accounts. They're asking for city business.
For city business.
And we will
Wherever
show you any
it's-
records that
wherever
are
it's
city
at.
business records, which happen to not be on my personal account.
Right.
But the second issue we haven't addressed yet is text records, which were asked for here.
Okay.
I'm just trying to clarify, I don't understand, the first request was made. It sounded like it was made for the same dates. And I don't, when did it expire and why wasn't it fulfilled? I don't know. So it sounds like the second request is just kind of a reiteration of the first request.
Well, let's be clear, there's only been one request that I've made.
So
They denied it, and I appealed that.
I am afraid that going down that road will get us off topic.
Okay, so that's not
Okay.
part of it. I don't know, it just seems like a citizen, I'm wondering why that first request, was it the first same dates?
I believe that the requests are the same, but.
The same
I
dates?
guess we just heard something about 2012.
Right.
And then they're saying that they
So if there
didn't
was a
get
request in
fulfilled.
2012,
No,
there was no request in 2012,
No,
There
correct?
was an earlier request that was just like this.
And was it fulfilled?
No.
It was denied.
It's because we're trying to resolve the issue.
Oh, right, but during that period of denial, we were deleting these records, so they didn't have to be.
No,
That's
no,
what
no.
he said I don't do that, but when the expired, the first one expired,
So there was an appeal to the records committee, and then Mr. Cromar revoked his appeal, which then in essence killed that request.
Okay, so you revoked it?
Yes.
With the clarification.
And this gets to questions of cost, because the request, as well as
So that's what
this
the
one,
same issue
asked
come
for-
back to.
asked for records for free, and when the response was made that the records would not be provided for free, that was part of the issue going into appeal. And then it was eventually dropped, so that of course the request is not fulfilled once the requester drops.
Can we
Clarification.
shelf that?
Shelf the clarification?
I was going to not go further down that, in the
Okay.
interest of time and in the interest of
So just trying to-
answering this request. So that what we need to discuss now is the text messages, and we need to resolve that, okay? So the request includes text messages, and I believe the city's response is that text messages fall under the transitory correspondence, so that you have, according to the schedule, you can delete those as soon as the information in them is no longer needed.
However, we do have policy that if you receive like a document by text, then you forward that to your email account, and then you can store that.
Right.
And so, I've never received a document by text, and so, I can't speak for the rest of the council members, but in order for someone to get the text messages, they really would have to go to AT&T or T-Mobile or Verizon or Sprint, someone that is, and good luck with that. And so, but all of the texts that we tend to give or get are along the lines of, I'm running late to a meeting, start without me. But, you're welcome to ask, but that's a problem. We can't provide things that don't belong to us.
Okay, Jenny?
I was just gonna clarify that. So they're not stored on a city server anywhere. We each have, my phone number is the phone number I had before I was a city council member. So I have my carrier and he's a different carrier. They're not stored by the city, they're stored by our service providers, I'm assuming. I don't know, I've never asked Sprint for my text records. But they're not stored by the city.
But I would suggest that you're saying that there's nothing substantial.
No, in fact, that's another one. I'm not on this request, but I would have no problem again signing an affidavit saying I don't have any city business on my text. I've never done city business on my text.
Neither have I.
So we'll include that, and we could do this one of two ways, Sam. We can take text messages out of the request, or include the text messages on the affidavit.
And I agree that you just can't demand affidavits, and that's why I said that I would propose that as a solution, as I think my exact words. So I think there's a little bit of a difference between a demand and a proposed solution. And I do support the affidavit idea, and I'm willing to use that to resolve this.
Okay, so what if Gary asked David Bunker to sign an affidavit saying that I'm not saying that you would, but suppose Gary asked David to sign an affidavit saying that there is no city business on his personal accounts or in his cell phone, and Gary says, I really don't want to do that.
I don't think anybody on that list would have a problem, any current employee. I can't speak for anybody who's not a current employee.
Right.
But anybody who's a current employee.
Would do that.
Would do that. It's, that's not an issue for us to say that we do all of our city business, either on our city business account. If it's a text and it's city business, then we forward that to our email account as well.
Okay.
And none of us, there's not a city employee that wouldn't sign an affidavit to that effect. It's
Okay.
not a problem.
Okay, that's not a problem.
The
Does that
problem is we've
resolve
got
that?
some people involved there that are not current city employees.
Okay.
I'm just talking about.
You're talking about Eric and Conrad and
Kim and Jim. And Brett.
And Brett.
Well, we can't do anything,
So I propose that.
It could be asked.
You feel
Can we ask
comfortable
you to
asking
report the
them?
response?
No.
No.
It's not that I don't feel comfortable. It's how are you gonna compel someone to provide their personal email accounts?
No.
And so Ken keeps saying he wants me to subpoena their records.
No, you can. I'm not saying to do that.
you're saying that that's an option
Have an option.
and so I would have to have a reason to do that. I see none.
Okay, and I would come back and say, we can ask these non-employees to sign an affidavit. And the idea would be, guys, it's not that we don't trust you, we're kind of Ronald Reagan, we're gonna trust but verify. There's a serious concern in the city and outside the city of a lack of transparency, a trust issue based on what's happened in the past. We can go into a lot of those details, but I'll defer to Rosemary and skip that for now. It would be a fulfilling trust, and those people can not do it. You can report that if they choose that they won't do it. But the more that do, the greater the trust will be.
Eric?
An alternate proposal would be, you could just go to those
Yeah.
people and ask them.
That's what
You're welcome to ask them, why does the city have to?
Because they're not city employees anymore, right?
That's right. Well, the point is the city could professionally respond to the grammar request. We have these records, we don't have these records, we've gotten affidavits from people, we've asked for the records, those individuals have responded no, and simply report. It's that simple, it's not a complicated process.
And the reason the city should do it though is, look, there's questions about trusting the city. If Sam Bushman just asks so-and-so for, to sign an affidavit, they're gonna be like, why would we do that for you, Sam? No offense, but you're nobody. Whereas on the other hand, if the city says, listen, we're trying to build trust within our community, we've all done this, we're asking you to do this as well, and then they say yes or no and they report back, that's quite telling, number one. And number two, it's a different request for a greater purpose than Sam Bushman.
Yeah. Okay. Jenny?
I would just say a third suggestion is that the city can provide what the city has, the requesters could review that, and then if they feel like there is some concern that they need these personal text messages from former employees, ask for that at that point.
Okay, are you all right with that, Sam?
And I guess I'm just saying, why not just ask and get it on record? Why the hesitancy? Would you like to build trust? And what I'd really like to do, to be honest with you, I started looking into this information at first to try to clear the city. Because I really would like to move to Cedar Hills, okay? And my goal was to try to clear the city and say, you know what, guys, this is all bogus. It's good. And what's kind of strange is I've kind of been attacked and there's been weird stuff that's gone on that make me really wonder. And so as a result of that, I'm saying, you know, to me, it's about trust. And I'm hoping that we can come out of this mediation spending less money, not more. And we would end up with an idea that, you know what? We can take Cedar Hills as the forward-thinking solution city for the nation. That, you know what? We're modern, we're transparent, we've cleared the past baggage that we've had, we've done so in the most trustworthy, transparent way we can. To me, it could be a real success story.
Thank you.
But I don't know why it's so hard to get there.
My only hesitancy with asking former employees for access to their personal phones is that if for whatever reason they say no, because.
No, we're asking them for an affidavit, not personal.
Or whatever the case is. If for
At
whatever
least according
reason
to our
they say
proposal.
no, maybe they don't want to go through the last 2 years of their text messages and review. I don't know, whatever the reason. My concern is that if these former employees say no, then they are going to be portrayed as hiding something.
That's right.
When that's not the case at all. And so I
Well, we don't know if that's the
I fear because that has happened in the past, that these people who just don't work for the city anymore will be portrayed as untrustworthy or hiding something simply because they don't want to go through 2 years of their text messages.
Okay.
You mean perceived, not
Eric?
portrayed?
Huh?
Portrayed could be,
Portrayed on websites or whatever the case is.
they might be perceived that way.
Well, or if somebody is telling other people that they're
I think
something
we should
behind.
just be happy with the current employees and city officials signing the affidavit. Please don't.
It's on your feet, it's
Okay.
on ground, it's not on.
I think that should be good enough. And if the state or if other people want to ask those people, then that should be fine. But we need to move on from this. If the city's willing to sign it, I feel good about that. I think we need to move on this issue.
Okay, this issue is now resolved by saying that Sam has requested that you ask former employees, and it's up to the city to decide yes or no.
Okay.
And I'm saying in the effort of trust or whatever, I think there'd be greater trust if they asked for that. It would also help clear the city in my mind, saying we've done our best to make sure that there's no issues there. If you look at the list of people there, We can drill down on the concerns of the different people that aren't employees now, but that's not actually a pretty story.
Well, what have
Oh,
these people
that's-
done that are no longer employed? What have they
That's-
actually done that's
Oh,
wrong? Do
well,
you know?
we're not saying they've done anything wrong, but I'll give you one example.
Stop right here, okay, please? Let's don't go there.
Can I
We
give
don't
one
have time.
example?
No.
Let's stop.
Only because it's the former recorder.
Let's not go there right now, okay?
All right.
Thank you. Eric?
Let me just point something out. If one person asks another person for something personal,
Yeah.
they may be a pest. If the government asks a citizen for something personal, that can be viewed as an unconstitutional invasion of privacy. So I would very much caution the city about pressing individuals who are no longer with the city for their things from their personal accounts.
Okay.
Because there's genuine challenges.
It's harassment.
But we're talking about an affidavit here and inviting them to sign, not a pressure to dig through their accounts. That we're creating a solution to build trust for the city, right?
Right.
If-
affidavit is
We're
what we're
gonna
talking
stop this right here. I'm leaving it with, it's up to the city to decide if they wanna do that or not.
Okay.
Okay? Is that resolved?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other issues with responding to the request that you want to talk about? That are not resolved? Yes, Eric?
Yes. The request asks for, let me make sure I get this right. It gives the date frame, and then it says, as normally maintained. Mr. Geringer, in his response to the city's decision, said, we are only requesting to inspect records, and I'm going to leave out the citations. We are only requesting to inspect records as they are, quote, normally maintained, unquote, as required by law, quote, at the office of the recorder, close quote. We expect to come to the city recorder's office to inspect the records. Cost for, quote, compiling, formatting, manipulating, packaging, summarizing, or tailoring, close quote, the record is chargeable only when you are requested to compile a record, open quote, in a form other than that normally maintained by the governmental entity, close quote. We make no such request and do not want to inspect them in any other form. And so let me just explain the challenge that raises for the city, okay? That's a request, and mind you, remember, the request is for city accounts and personal accounts.
Okay, but we've decided that the,
But-
okay.
Okay, but that's what the request said. So when the city responds to that, it has to say, you can't inspect anybody's personal accounts. We'll gather that, which you tell us you don't want. But we'll gather that, and we can provide you that. That was part of the city's response. But even on the city's accounts, because the city accounts, the emails are not just by and between these people,
Right.
okay? There has to be manipulation and compilation of the emails in order to arrive at the emails that are requested. In addition to that, even once they're narrowed down to just the emails that are requested, the city cannot allow anyone to just come in and inspect those raw emails, because first, the city has to review them to remove private, controlled, and protected information. Then, once that happens, the city's more than happy to let someone inspect them. If they don't want a copy, that's great, but only then can they be inspected. And so I just wanted to get that on the table as to the scope of the request was to inspect both city accounts and personal accounts. But the city can't do that. And that was the city's response.
Okay, so I think we resolved that to the,
Yes,
We
yes,
have resolved that.
but we haven't resolved the inspecting portion.
Okay.
That the city cannot allow inspection even of city accounts until the records have been, the responsive records have been segregated, gathered and segregated from unresponsive records, and then have the private, protected, and controlled information removed.
Okay.
Is everybody okay if we
What's
do
our
it that way?
response?
That is not exactly.
I would like to go through step by step the process of what the city will do to respond to the request.
Very good.
Okay? Daniel?
Yes, and I just want to clarify, it sounded like Mr. Derringer in that email was asking to inspect the records before they were redacted.
Yes.
And I want to clarify with Mr. Derringer, that may not have been what you meant, but that sure sounded to me like what the email said.
No.
And we need to make sure that that's off the table, we can't.
That was responding
that.
to the denial, I assume, that what you're reading. And it's when you get the records there in the form that you want them, so that we can inspect them, then we will come and inspect them.
Great. The city would agree to that. No problem.
That's what it meant. If you interpreted it otherwise, I failed.
Okay, I think I explained what I understood. I must have misunderstood what was wanted. I apologize.
Okay, that's good. So some of it's just miscommunication. So, Colleen, do you feel comfortable beginning a discussion of how you would go about responding to the request? What would be the first thing? How would this happen? If not, is there someone else from the city who can? But I thought since you were the recorder,
Well, we didn't discuss fees yet, did we?
we're gonna save that till last.
Okay. Because basically, if it's gonna be over $50, we can tell them what we're estimating. And until we receive that payment, we really don't start to work to fulfill a request until the payment's received.
Right.
Because if they decide not to pay, then I've spent all of that time on something that, oh, guess what, we don't want it anymore, we're not paying you, so. But say I was paid, then the people involved would have to start printing out, compiling their emails, getting them to me so I can read them, redact them, and then keep the log of what got redacted from each email that had reductions.
Okay, so.
Can I speak?
Yes.
See, we go to this printing out thing again. When we print it out, we take it out of the digital form, however they put it back in, we lose the search capabilities, we lose all the different digital realities of email. And so what I'm saying is to go backwards in an effort to fulfill a request seems archaic to me. It seems to me that when we talk about the cost of compliance for this, or fulfilling, putting them in print and then somehow trying to scan them or do something, not only does it, in my opinion, change the format from a digital email to a paper email, but it takes away the search capabilities and all the different appropriate digital terms. We're going backwards, not forwards. I'm only bringing this up and focusing on this point because no wonder it's so hard to fulfill this request. I just imagine poor Miss Mulvey over there and mountains of paper higher in her head going, holy crap. And I don't blame her.
Can I respond to this issue? Because I
Yes,
actually
you may.
spent some time, since I'm a computer science professor, I was asked by the mayor to meet with our city manager to discuss their collection process. So there are two ways that the city could potentially fulfill this request.
Okay.
The first step is certainly to go through all of the emails that are being requested. So, for example, David Bunker's one of the parties here. So David would have to go through all of his emails and find those that are from him to any of these other parties, or from those parties to him. So there's a search process involved that is a first step, and that does require some time.
And ask how
Whether-
long that
whether
process
they're
you
going
estimate
to-
takes.
Sorry, I'll continue and then you can save some questions if there's additional questions. Once those emails are collected, then the question is, how are they going to be redacted? The process that Ms. Mulvey has suggested is that the city employees are going through the emails, printing them out one by one, collecting the paper, and then going through and redacting them by hand according to the criteria. The alternative that Mr. Bushman is suggesting is that you would have to save the email to a separate file and then use some kind of electronic program. Adobe makes some software where you can then open that file up in Adobe and redact it electronically and keep it in the electronic format. Okay? It is not clear to me, despite Mr. suggestions, that converting to an electronic process will save the city any money.
I'm someone who uses a computer fairly frequently. If I were to redact a bunch of emails by hand, I believe I would actually be faster. If you timed me and said, here's 100 emails, redact these by hand, and then compared that to having to click and use a mouse to highlight sections, make sure the highlighting was accurate, select it and block it out, it's not clear to me that I actually would be faster. I might be slower redacting 100 emails that way. So I'm certainly open to the city examining whether they can save money with that particular process. But the fact of the matter is the city doesn't have that process in place right now. We do not own that software. We do not have not verified that that would actually save us money to go and make that purchase. And that is a purchase that would have to be vetted by staff to decide if it would actually save us money. So right now our process is to print them out and to redact them by hand. That is just what our process is right now.
Okay, Daniel, the problem is with the redaction, not the gathering though. Is that right? Is that what you're saying? I mean,
It's a
you
little
could-
bit of both,
you
in the
could-
sense that
could you
if I was
gather-
going to redact by hand,
Uh-huh.
then I have to print them out.
Right.
If I'm going to redact electronically, I still have to save them, store them in a file, organize and manage those files, make sure that I copy them correctly. I mean, there is some overhead in the collection process, even if the redaction is done electronically. There's a separate step of collecting the emails to be done electronically that has to be done. And in the past, the city tried to do that process and accidentally gave emails to Mr. Cromer that were unredacted, or that were redacted, but he was able to undo the redaction.
That is a
Quite
false
true. There was a
accusation.
way
Those
that it was
doc-
undone and the original records were retrieved.
McPherson?
You know, I'm
So we
hearing
just
this,
need to be careful that that's done properly.
I'm hearing this dinosaur approach to redaction. I can see why it would cost so much. I mean, paper itself will cost. If we're talking stacks of paper, just the paper alone, and then the printing alone, then the time, and how can you be sure that your magic marker is going to redact carefully so that it's not noticeable information? We've been doing this for years. We can do a find all of a phrase through millions of documents and remove it like that. We have the software to redact quickly and easily anything electronically. So for a professor, I believe you know more than that. For a
This is not-
professor to tell me that it has to go to paper and then we're going to scribble things out, wow, what year are we living in here?
This is not a search and replace redaction process.
No,
This is
redacted
having to
then.
find an
Redacted.
individual piece of
Text
information.
Wrangler is a beautiful piece of software that redacts
Such
for
as
you.
finding phone numbers, such as finding various other
Absolutely.
information.
Absolutely.
It may not necessarily fit an easy search and replace
So
process.
if I have a stack of documents and I say, I want to get rid of all the phone numbers, I put in a search for anything that fits phone number, and then I say, put a redaction strike over that. It's done. And it looks just like someone had a magic marker and did it. Why are we, back to here.
Rosemary.
Back to here, we have a situation where your citizens are looking at you thinking, you guys are great, and you have been elected because of transparency. And then you put all of these roadblocks up for us to ask for simple information. Well, we've got to print out papers. Well, we've got to do this. And then we're going to erase it after a year. I'll tell you, this city now, I've been here the longest, and now is the time that I would like to move because I sense a great level of lack of transparency here and dishonesty, and especially when we put big roadblocks up like this when I know it can be done like that. Okay? I'm a little intense here, but I see a lot of, you know, when you say, well, it makes a person look guilty if they say no to what you're requesting. Well, the same goes for this direction. We're asking for some simple things, but we are getting so many interesting roadblocks here that it really leads me to believe that maybe there is something that's being hid here. Because I've had faith in my government, but just tonight I'm thinking, hey, maybe there is something that they're trying to hide. And so let's just keep building mountain after mountain of obstacles in order to get simple approaches and information, because we all really want to trust our government, but I'm telling you tonight, I'm not so sure.
Okay, so you think that it wouldn't be that difficult to gather these in electronic format?
I know, because this is the kind of stuff I do, and I can't understand why someone so, I mean, you're BYU, aren't you? Aren't you on the cutting edge of technology? You should be. This should not be something that goes to paper with magic markers.
Jenny?
Donnie?
Again, as I explained, there's 10.
Oh, I'm
there's-
sorry, you
There's,
can be next.
as I explained, there's 10 pages of information that the state has given us that we have to redact.
Okay.
One example just says, commercial information or non-individual financial information obtained from a person if disclosure of the information can reasonably be expected to result in unfair competitive injury to the person submitting the information or would impair the ability of the governmental entity to obtain necessary information in the future. That's not a searchable field. That's why somebody has to go through every single email to look and see what redaction, because that's not something we can put in a computer to say, search for this, and it's gonna find it. And there's
Okay.
10 pages of that from the state.
Yes, and even with phone numbers where you might think they would be searchable, phone numbers come in various formats, right? So if somebody puts in the parentheses, somebody leaves them out. Somebody puts in a dash, somebody leaves it out. If I simply say, well, I have to take any number field that is certain numbers long, now I'm gonna be over redacting information, which the city is liable for. So it's not clear to me that I can trust a filter, even for phone numbers, much less the type of information that is much more abstract.
So my question,
Should just be looked at.
Sam
Want to finish this question, could I?
Okay, you finish the question and then Sam.
Okay, so what you're saying to me then is, if I hand you a piece of software that will redact 20,000 numbers, and you will get a sheet that's got lots of black stuff on it, you still feel that it would be necessary to print out, why not look through the document and say, oh, and there's one last thing missing, and that one, let's redact these two. Instead of redacting 20 things off a page that were already automatically done for you, when you look through that page, you only have 2 more to redact.
Let me clarify that I did not state that I was certain that it would not save us money. I was stating that we needed to investigate whether it would save us money, and it's not clear to me before I investigate that software whether it would actually be a better process at this point.
So just
What we have to deal with is the process we have in place.
Sam wanted to talk several turns ago, so.
Yeah. I would say, those things are called macros. You build macros that overstrike or redact information. And I'm simply saying, let's talk about whether we use the manual process they've got right now, which seems to me quite archaic. I think that software can certainly speed up the process substantially. But let's talk about, Kim Collins felt like, hey, I can redact for $30 an hour, whatever the number she gave was. And Kim Hollendrick felt like that was a doable thing.
And
Now we've changed to where we've got the recorder who hardly hasn't said a word in this discussion, which is kind of interesting to me. But furthermore, we've got to have her look through it, David Bunker look through it, $150 an hour attorney look through it. And as far as I understand, there's certified people that can do this in a given state, like the recorder. I'm not here to debate what the recorder gets paid, but I'm talking it's 10, 20, 30, 40, $50 an hour, not $150+ an hour. And, we can debate the process, I guess, but I'm saying, is it really that Sam's asking, the end of my denial says, Sam, you're gonna just bankrupt the city almost, kind of an idea. And I'm saying, I think there are ways to redact that information for a lot less money than we're talking about here, even if you stick with the manual process, but I also submit, we can absolutely speed up and simplify the process with software significantly. And I guess instead of setting me a denial that says, Sam, you're gonna bankrupt the city almost, kind of a denial, I think we ought to visit this discussion before we make claims like that, number one. And number two, does it really cost almost $200 an hour to redact, really? I don't think so. Rosemary? Well, how much is it by the time the attorney goes through it, $150, $200, what does he charge an hour? In addition to, say, David Bunker, I don't know what he's at per hour, and then the city recorder and who else does it, what are they per hour? If we've got a double redact, what kind of dollars are we talking about then?
Okay.
I made a guesstimation of the dollar amounts. What is it really? Maybe somebody can clarify that for me.
I'm just looking at an email here dated February 23rd of 2012, where Brad Sears is, it's sent to him through city officials right now. I have a question about that. Why is this being acknowledged? He's no longer involved with the city. Didn't
Good
he resign
question.
or whatever? I'm just now reading through all this information and I want to know what this is about. It's from Mayor Gigi and Conrad Hildebrandt and Stephanie Martinez. All these people are involved in this conversation. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't.
I do.
Okay.
What you're noting is that Brad Sears was copied on an email that went to other people. It wasn't requested from him.
It says to him.
Because the other people, because it's by and between the other people there, that's why it was provided. And frankly, Brad Sears should have been redacted off of that.
Because it just says from Conrad to Scott Jackman and Brad Sears, and then
Right.
CC to other people, and then Brad Sears actually responds to it.
The request was by and between emails from the city manager and the city council members. And Brad Sears, he should have been stricken.
Mrs. Lucy, I can answer your question though. I think your question is, why are they talking to Brad Sears?
Yeah.
So there have been times where I have talked to former mayors or council members because I didn't live here at the time, and so I want their perspective on an issue. And they were elected officials at the time.
Well, this guy wasn't even, I mean, he had resigned quite a bit earlier. So I'm just wondering why he was involved with the city issue about a legislative issue that's going on.
Yeah, I don't know which email, but I can give you maybe some background, which is that and if that's in 2012, that email, that means that Mrs. Reese and I were very new council members. And so I think that without knowing the context of the email, probably asking Brad, who had spent some time as mayor, maybe some input on how to deal with the legislature, if that's what it is, or he
It's
may
about
have.
SB 180.
Or yeah, if it's about SB 180, that's Senate Bill 180. So probably asking Brad some history about dealing with the state legislature because he served as mayor. So we're just asking, I'm assuming, a former elected official how to deal with the legislature.
Okay. I'm just,
And I would question consulting forced to resign people that would, anyway.
I think we can consult with anybody we want to consult with.
I think you can, but the trust of the city reduces significantly when you do that.
but you know, I read the email and there's nothing bad in here.
That's
I
right.
want to clarify that. It's just, I was curious because it was to him and the Scott Jackman, and so this is the first I'm seeing of this. I'm trying to educate myself.
And the implication here is that Mr. Sears is a disgraced former official.
That's right.
But he's actually held in good standing in the community and widely regarded as a good person who did a good job for the city by many residents.
I think it's despicable the way that some people have treated Mr. Sears. And this isn't someone I socialize with. He's not a close friend of mine. He and I disagree on a lot of issues. We're disagreeing on some right now. But Mr. Cromar somehow thinks that Mr. Sears did something nefarious a long time ago.
And I don't know why he resigned.
If that's the case, prove it.
You're putting words in my mouth, Gary. I do not appreciate that. You're putting words into my mouth, getting into my heart and saying this is what you think and declaring it as fact.
Fine. Okay. I'm not going to say what's in your mind. It certainly
I'll
seems
verify
that
you
way.
said that to me, Ken.
Let's
Go ahead,
stop right
quote.
here, okay? Let's not go right, let's not do this, okay, please?
This is a very childish argument. We got so much energy
We
and
got-
negative here.
And I'm not trying to start anything, I just.
Let's
read
get-
something.
I want to go back to my question though. How much per hour is it to redact records?
Let's answer your question, but let's go back to, take one step backwards and talk about gathering the responsive email. Is it possible to do that without redacting anything in an electronic format, first of all?
Just to compile them?
Just to compile them electronically in a folder or with labels or with something so that you have a body of, these are the email that are responsive, they're identified, and then
Prior to redaction?
Prior to
certainly you
redaction,
can
prior to
store them in
redaction, yes, is
electronic
that
format.
possible?
Yes.
Certainly.
Okay, and then we would know what we're dealing with, how many email, all that. So could we take it to that step?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
She's asking us to put all the emails in
You're asking
electronic
the
form
recorder if she can
before
do this.
they redact.
Before you redact
Put them in
and
an
before you
electronic
print, put everything that's responsive to the request in an electronic folder in one place.
Certainly, but it may be extra work.
Okay,
In other words, it would be faster if we were going to print them out in order to redact them, to print them as we see them, rather than have to collect them first in a folder and then open them up again and print them out.
now I have another question before we go any further. I noticed a number of people have walked out, they're leaving. It's late. Do we want to continue this discussion later, or do we want to keep talking?
Later. That's actually Sam's prerogative.
My response is I can't force anybody to stay. This is a mediation meeting. I'm willing to continue. However, I'm also willing to meet at another time. I'm gonna make myself as available as I possibly can.
It feels like we made some progress, and,
But before we leave, I would like to get my question answered, not have it hanging though.
okay.
Okay,
And
because
your
I asked a
question-
very direct, appropriate question that relates exactly to the fulfilling of the request. It's not off topic, it's not confusing, it's very direct.
Okay, and the question he asked was, how much does it cost to do the redaction?
I don't know if we can answer that.
I don't know off the top of my head how
Yeah.
much people make. It would be the cost of the person, what their salary is for each hour, but I don't
And
know.
I said per hour though, we were talking about.
But what does that have to do with their grammar request? It doesn't have anything to
Because
do
we
Well,
with
it has
can't
everything to do with,
charge
the- hold on, has everything to do with my partial denial that says, Sam, you can submit your payment, which by the way I did. And you can, how does the end of it, can somebody quote it? If somebody's got a handy, I apologize. If I have my computer here, I can read it. Without it, I'm at the mercy here a little bit.
What you looking for, Sam?
Because it's on paper.
What are you
Just
looking
saying. And what I want to know though is how does the partial denial end? It talks about,
I can
I
read
can
it
submit
for
my
you.
request, but it would be at a great expense to the city or some, that's why this is completely relevant.
Would you like me to read it for you?
Because I'm being blamed for just running the city into bankruptcy almost.
I'm happy to read it for you. Would you like me to?
Sure.
As stated in the above reference code, preparation costs for record location, compilation, and segregation are separate from the legal review costs. Legal review expense, including redaction, are in addition to the compilation and preparation of the record. While you will not be obligated to pay such expenses, the incurred legal expenses will cost the citizens of Cedar Hills in tax funds that could be spent elsewhere, and amount many, many times the amount estimated to compile the requested records. These are funds that are already stretched to the limit.
Okay, so I'm saying it directly relates to, I'm saying, hey, how much is this redaction costing? And how much could it cost? I believe there's certified people that can do it for significantly less money than having an attorney review every single record.
I agree.
I'm convinced of that, and I'm convinced that in other situations, that's done. In fact, if we want to go back to the former recorder, that's what I understand she did.
No, she was.
gave an estimate of what it would take.
2 to 3 hours at $29 an hour, which was the lowest paid employee that could, according to state law, the lowest paid employee that can, at the determination of the city recorder or the city, I forget who it is, says can competently do that. What we have not covered yet, that I want to iterate,
That's
and
what
you
we
could
have,
clarify,
that's
Rosemary, is that there is certification requirements that have been in place for at least 2 years now, that someone in a municipality, in our case it's Holy Moly, has the ability to go through those sorting issues. She's trained to do that. She's certified to do that.
And she will do that.
I'm agreeing with you. My point is very rarely does there need to be legal review. And the point is we're printing them out going backwards. Gary, you told me that you were stacking them and then sending them on to the attorney. You said that at the end of January when I met with you in your office. I'm just saying that we had a 21-year veteran in Kim Hollandrake who made an estimate on what is arguably a much bigger request last time, 2 years ago. This one is smaller, and yet, she, as the 21-year expert said, it'll take me 2 to 3 hours. It's a quick sort. It's this, that, and the other. The city began going through it manually by the city manager, and she came back and said, he's only got 3 months worth of records or 4 or whatever it was. If you want to continue, it's already eaten up your 3 hours, and it's now going to cost hundreds more. Really? He wasn't supposed to go through them. Those records were supposed to be in the office of the recorder. And so that's the kind of thing we're dealing with right now.
We have to listen to complaints about things that have already been.
Excuse me, I'm talking and you're interrupting.
This is not about the current
Excuse me, I'm
request.
talking and you're interrupting. It relates
Yes,
directly.
I am, because you're talking about things that are on topic.
It relates directly to this request because this request is costing $900, which is more than the last one, which was bigger. And we're saying that we have to print them out. Everybody in this room that's ever done an email sort knows that that happens. You put your name, boom, boom, it's done within a second. Who
Okay.
here does not know that?
Ken?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So what I would like to propose is that the city compile the responsive emails in a.
But do I get my question answered or no?
I think we
The
did.
answer is already that they don't know.
But wait a minute, we know that the attorney goes through it,
Wait,
whatever
let-
his
can I
cost is.
finish,
Sure.
please? Thank you. The requesters will pay for compiling the email, right?
Well,
So after you receive the money, you'll put all of the responsive email into a folder, in an electronic folder, and I want to know if that's reasonable. With no redactions and no expectation that they will be turned over. But if we took it to that point, then we could see how much would be involved in doing the redactions. Is that reasonable?
So-
It's a proposal.
So then are you proposing that once you know how many emails are, that we're gonna narrow that scope from 10,000 pages to 5,000 pages? Is that the point?
I guess I would say that after we gathered that and knew what it was we were talking about, we could have another conversation.
and I'm saying that I'd prefer to find out what it's really taking to do this and find out if there's a way to help them decrease the costs.
That's right, Sam, but I think we have to know what it is we're
But
talking
the
about.
redaction cost is not passed on to the
No, it's not.
requester. So what's the point?
Well, you can talk to the citizens about that.
Well, I would be happy to, because it's the citizens that pay for that legal review. So I'll have that discussion every day of the week, that Mr. Cromer and his friends cost the residents, and I know you don't want to hear this, Linda, but they cost you guys a lot of money, and it's probably in the hundreds,
But we
over
don't know how much
100,000
per
at
hour
this
it's even
point.
costing.
That-
saying the
I'm
first-
talking, Sam.
The first way to reduce that would be to find out.
Okay, Sam,
that
I'm
cost.
talking, you can wait till I'm done. And so, I know that's not what you want to hear, but that's the reality, is that the grammar requests are not free. So, the compilation costs, which we can pass on to Mr. Bushman and Mr. Derringer, and Mr. Cromar, that's a fraction of the cost that you as residents pay. And I'm flabbergasted that you don't care. I mean, because
You know what we care most about is trust and
Yeah.
transparency.
Absolutely.
That's what we care most about.
I do too.
And I
We heard
don't
a
know,
citizen say
I
they
don't
don't
know
care.
that.
Okay.
Eric, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
I want to end this on a positive note, and I would like to, be able to gather the email so that we can see what we're talking about, how much it is, what kind of redactions really would need to be made. But you handled a request like this before, and I would like you to give us some specific examples of what was in the email that was redacted.
Well.
I mean, not specific, but what kinds of information? Now, phone numbers have been brought up. Okay.
Addresses.
Addresses.
There was,
What kinds of things were there?
yeah, there was personal information about people that when they interacted with the city were on some of the emails. And that had to be removed.
Hey, would that be likely to be in these emails between city employees?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Because someone, it could be a business in the city would communicate with one of these employees, or a citizen could interact with one of these employees, and then that can be relayed to someone else,
Okay.
because they're coordinating with each other. And so that type of information is there. And one of the things we had to look at, what Mrs. Reese read, was we had to look and make sure that there was no information in there that a business had sent us that was sensitive to their business, that might be in an email, that we remove that sort of thing. But this time around, it will be handled a little bit differently, Mr. Bushman. I don't think you quite heard earlier when it was said that the city recorder and city manager would go through and do the initial redaction. attorneys will only be involved where they have questions, where
Okay,
there-
that's good to
where
clarify.
there's a judgment call and they're uncertain. And so, no, the city attorney isn't going to go over everything.
Oh, no, really? Because that's different than when we were talking at the meeting.
Right, and let me back up.
Hold on,
Last-
hold on,
no,
hold on, she made a
no,
claim, and I wanna know if that's
I mean,
correct.
Eric's still talking.
I just wanna know if that's correct from her statement, though. She said it's different, I wanna know, is that true?
In 2012, I think maybe what you're recalling was in 2012 when Mr. Cromar made a similar broad-based grandma request. At that time, the city recorder had resigned, as well as the city manager,
Right.
as well as the mayor. And so my office was asked to do all of the redaction at that time. I think maybe that's what was expressed to you.
No, because I asked, so does the attorney have to look at this every time? Because I was concerned about the cost, and you said yes.
Right. We will review, but only where there's judgment calls. And if we miscommunicated there, I apologize.
Okay, so not every time, like I've got a request in right now. My request to know about violations on my street with parking, that's not gonna be reviewed by your office.
Correct.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
it wouldn't be.
See, that was one thing that I asked, and I
Okay,
guess.
I'm
it
sorry
wasn't-
if we
okay.
weren't clear.
So, well, that makes a big deal. So, yeah, I'd like to know what needs to be reviewed by you, because I think it's easy to see someone's phone number or email address and just cross that out. I don't think we need to have an
I don't
attorney
need to
look
do
at that
that.
every time.
No. I just get involved on the judgment call.
And then my other thing when we spoke was, why can't a paralegal do it? They can do it for $25 an hour versus, pay a full attorney.
Frankly, my guess is Colleen is at least as well versed as many paralegals.
Well, I just know that you had said, well, they're not an attorney, we have to look at it. So that's all I'm saying is.
Yeah.
I think Colleen is certified and she probably is very capable of figuring it out.
There is a log for each of the previous grammar requests that lists exactly what was redacted in each case.
Uh-huh.
So if you're wanting to see what types of things will get redacted, the log states, here's an email, here's the subject of the email, this is the category of information that was redacted. There's a very long log that by law we are required to provide with the grammar request stating which
So
redaction
much
was
was
made.
addresses and.
Daniel, do you know what % of the email had redactions?
No, I don't have that
Because,
data handy.
yeah.
But
Would
it
the
is a
recorder
long
know
log.
that? That's a good question for her, she's the one.
With that last request, I was.
I'm not sure what the percentage was. There were 48 pages in the privilege log, and there were between 6,000 and 7,000 responsive pages
Uh-huh.
that were handed over. So
Okay,
that gives you an idea of the scope.
okay. Well,
I have a question. It sounds like the reporter has information of redacting. And does she also require to do all of the electronic procedures? It sounds like maybe she doesn't understand all of that IT technical kind of thing. Maybe that's something she can have some assistance at. But redacting, I mean, recording, she has a specialty, but not in getting all of the information electronically. It's not her specialty.
We don't have the software at the moment either.
But the
Do you
city
know how much it
would
would cost?
have to back you up and assist you in that.
Do you know how much it would cost?
Daniel?
No, there's another issue, which is you're trying to, I appreciate you trying to resolve the meeting because we've been here a long time.
Right, I want to wrap it up and
And you're
come
asking.
to a point and then.
Right, so you're asking, can we compile the records first?
Uh-huh,
And an issue with that is that one of the requesters is not here, the Daily Herald, which had promised to pay a significant portion of the cost,
Cost, right.
$900. So without them paying, the city's not able to
do
start
it.
making that
I can address that
collection
issue.
process.
Having
The other
spoken with
issue
the
here-
managing editor today.
The other issue here is that, I mean, we've agreed what the scope of the request is,
yes.
right? We've agreed what needs to be collected, and the city is able and ready to make that collection
Right.
as soon as the costs of that are paid.
Right,
And so it seems to me that we really only have one more thing to address, which is, are the costs going to be paid? If the costs are going to be paid, the city has a mechanism in place to provide all that information
and to redact it. I don't see that we have a big issue to settle here.
There's nothing left to
That
settle.
would
you're
require a
saying.
major meeting. If the requesters are willing to pay the amount that was specified, we have the scope of the request all agreed upon. It's just a matter of doing it once they pay. I don't see any major issue holding anything up here.
Okay.
But you put an open-end cost because of the procedure, how you're doing it.
No, we can only
No.
charge for the compilation.
We have a-
I think you gave an estimate.
Yeah. The estimate is in the letters that were in. that were
It sounds to me like an open-ended.
It was $87 for a couple of the requesters and $900 thereabouts for the Daily Herald.
Okay,
So that's a final amount?
I think
That
that,
is that a final amount?
The roughly $1,000 is just for the compilation. And
They
so,
can't go
but the
higher.
legal review is estimated between 10 and 15,000.
Yeah,
Back
see,
to the
that's
legal though,
exactly-
why, again, are we running back to legal when there's someone qualified to go through most of this?
Well, she is gonna do that.
When we
When
say
you say
legal
legal review, we
review,
mean the report.
All right.
we mean legal as.
There was,
like,
last
legal.
time, there was 10,000 pages.
okay.
And when you go through those pages, you have to log them, you have to redact them. So,
So after $11,000 then to cover everything is what you're saying?
well, that's an estimate. I mean, Mr. Johnson estimated between 10 and 15,000, but we don't know how many pages there are. Last time, there was close to 10,000.
So how much are you saying just to compile?
To compile is
All
about
the
$1,000. The
Yeah.
the amount is put in
And
the
that's
letter.
probably not the true cost. The true cost is probably north of that, but that's all that we're charging.
So if we go to 1,000, then maybe we can reconvene and say, okay, we have everything here, paid $1,000, now let's decide the easiest, quickest, least expensive way to redact it.
That's what I was suggesting. To get together, but to compile and see what
Absolutely.
the volume is we're talking about.
Can't estimate unless we have something to estimate.
There have been estimations made, but to actually, and the word compile is really a sticking point for me personally, because it becomes a legal term that says they can charge for it. The actual sort that we talk about in these grammar requests, to see those documents as maintained, takes seconds. That's why it was requested that way. That's why it wasn't asking for golf course. That's why it was, here's your documents, here's between these people and these dates, instantly that can be ascertained. That's the point I think keeps getting lost on everybody. That's done easily within an hour. Kim Holland-Drake said 2 to 3 at the most. And now the city is saying, well, we'll go ahead and gather those, but it's all a compilation cost. No, there is no compilation cost to do an email sort. It's done within the hour. It's $50.
That is incorrect.
I think that.
Because you're including in the cost only an email sort, and you are not including in the cost the process of saving each individual email to a file in
Oh,
a folder.
please.
That
Really?
has to be done per email, and if
Really?
there are 10,000 emails, that's 10,000 save off copies that we do.
We'll select all and forward.
Okay, so I'd like to
technology.
wrap that up.
Can I have one more
One
point
last
before we wrap it up?
point?
All right, yeah, the last point is this. I've got a partial denial, which I'm still, to this point at the end of this meeting, not positive what's being denied exactly. I've got a little bit more information than I had before. However, the term they gave me expires on Friday, okay? And they gave me 3 options for the partial denial. 1 was to pay, which I did. 2, which was to have mediation, which I'm attempting. 3 was to appeal to the records committee, which will be quite expensive, and I'm trying to avoid that expense. So I guess my question is, how does this expiration, and I guess that would be a question for either the recorder or the attorney, how does this expiration timeline relate to options and/or the fulfilling of my request? And the reason this is important to do now is because if we meet later, I won't have that chance to know.
Now,
Eric,
you use a term I'm not familiar with. Expiration time on, what do you mean by that?
He means that you gave him a partial denial, and you said he can appeal to the records committee, but it has to be within 30 days.
30 days?
And his 30 days are up in 2 more days.
Yeah. Nothing the city can do can change that.
But what the city can do is agree to extend that deadline, because if both parties agree to extend the deadline, you can do that.
Let me ask this.
That he has an
Here's-
intent to appeal. It
here's-
feels like things are.
Right, here's my question.
I'm hoping to not appeal. I've stated
What
that.
is it that we did not come to an agreement on that you
You could
think you
appeal.
might want to appeal on? I'm unclear. I thought
Well,
we resolved.
partially the cost that it takes to redact and produce these records.
But, no,
You
there's,
can't appeal that.
that's not.
I can appeal, and that discussion can appear before the committee though. Because the debate becomes, I say I want these records, they claim that, hey, it's incredibly expensive and that's why this is a problem or whatever else. The discussion of what it's taking to produce this records is relevant for the committee.
That was actually discussed at the last committee hearing.
Okay, and what did the judge have to say about that?
They said that our process was perfectly legal, and that they couldn't force any person to do it in a different way. That's not within their jurisdiction.
But didn't they also say that, hey, what you guys are doing is virtually reprehensible and,
No.
we've got to-
No,
they did not.
they didn't say that.
What did they say?
Just what I told you.
And that's it. They just said, hey, it's all good. The record keeping is great.
I can help you with what they said if you want, without tying everybody up.
Okay, so I'm saying though that I don't want to lose my opportunity to appeal if I choose to do that. And as far as I understand, I'm either forced to do it or we make an agreement differently.
I can help you with that too.
Well, I'm proposing that we make a different agreement to save everybody money and
What are you
expense,
proposing?
to extend the deadline.
You agree to extend his deadline to appeal another 30 days?
Appeal what?
Well,
I mean,
that's-
again, we've already.
Well, let's
agreed
read your
to hand over
partial
everything
denial.
That you asked.
Let's read your partial denial and see what it says my options are.
Yes, but what,
Because when you say appeal what, you state what. Let's hear it.
okay, you're appealing,
Let's talk about the partial
through-
denial.
Let's
and
go
let's
through.
read the part about the appeal, which is an option that the city gave me. Okay, you're not gonna put words in my mouth and make me articulate back to you what you wrote to me, okay? That's not gonna work. Let's read what you wrote my option is.
Okay, let's go over
Who will read that for us?
let's go over what the city is agreeing to provide for you. And then perhaps you can identify if there's something.
No, I'm asking about, in my denial, my third option, which is to go to the records committee.
Yes.
Okay, I wanna know what does it say I can go there for? Let's talk about it. Let's read it.
but you have 3 options, but what specifically would you appeal that we didn't resolve
And I'm saying let's read the exact wording.
of the?
Can I read this for you?
Sure.
Yes,
Okay, so it says, you asked for the personal email and text accounts of Mr. Brad
Okay, I did not.
Right?
Okay.
So we've agreed to resolve that issue.
That's resolved.
That's not been asked for. It says, it is the city's policy to only keep email records for a period of 1 year. So it's essentially telling you that we can only provide you emails going back for 1 year.
so that's.
Except for the printed out ones. And we could go to the appeal and discuss printed out, you're claiming they're not emails, I'm claiming that they are. The law that Ken read said that just because you change the format of them, that doesn't change the nature of them.
Excuse me, didn't we agree that
I think we
that
agree.
you would, if there are some that are printed out, that you would supply those?
Correct.
You now want us to search all paper files?
We agreed to that, but I
No.
don't think we
Well-
want you to go search all paper files. If there's something that you know about,
Wait,
right?
we don't?
Wait a second.
See, this is what I'm saying. They're claiming that if they print it out, that it doesn't count anymore, and I'm saying, the law says if you change the format to paper and don't call it an email anymore, that doesn't change the nature of the communication. You can't change the format to get out of the request.
I think what they're saying is that they don't want to have to research all the paper. I guess my assumption was if they printed it out, that you keep it in a copy. Now, you also said something about, I guess you were converting text messages into emails if they were actual business type, not, you don't keep the emails. Is there a chance that there's still emails that have not been eliminated, that are over a year?
Yes.
Okay.
It's my understanding that since December 1st of 2012, because Mr. Cromar submitted a request in December of 2013, that the city has not
Let's
deleted
get back to it.
any emails since then. Is that
Since
correct?
December of 2012?
Yes.
Let's get back to it. So you asked what I could appeal, that would be one right there. This debate about what paper is versus email versus changing the format and calling it something different, et cetera.
Well, I'm trying to clarify.
That's clearly something that I could appeal, and I think we have an open-ended discussion that's never been resolved relating to that. But let's keep reading though. What is it exactly, the wording?
The rest of it talks about, in addition, the city does not retain text messages, and so I thought we had
We thought we resolved that.
Well, we do if we
tonight.
pull out an affidavit and sign something, for sure. But if we don't get an affidavit signed before my expiration, then I can appeal that discussion, because you guys won't be bound to it unless you sign it right now. At the start of the mediation, we said, hey, anything that's done here, you can just simply say, I'm not agreeing to, later, which I agree, that's the mediation process. However, if you leave here and you don't sign it, then, you know, you might not agree to that anymore, huh? And my expiration might have already expired.
So Sam, how would you propose to resolve?
I already proposed an extension, that was one. Two, we can have an affidavit signed right now, though, that's one way to, both of those are options.
Jerry, let me print out a copy.
But why am I the only one to come up with solutions, though? The city created the timeline,
No, the law created the
okay?
timeline,
And the law provides for that to be extended, right?
if all parties.
So I first proposed that it to be extended, didn't I?
Do you have a problem with extending the timeline for the?
Well, let's
appeal?
go back to what Mr. Johnson, what
Because I
has,
don't see what there is to appeal that we didn't talk about.
Well, I just gave you two examples.
Okay.
I guess the question we have is if somebody changes their mind before we resolve it and get it,
Yeah.
you know, wrapped up, then we have a problem if we haven't extended the time.
That's right.
And so we're just asking, just to extend the time voluntarily and agree to it, just to try to button it up. We don't.
A better solution might be to do an affidavit now and extend the timeline. That would take one issue off the table and extend the timeline on the other.
Well,
Jerry worked on
this-
one.
This is
What is the affidavit going to
isn't
say?
a very good one, but one that I threw together.
We don't have all the people here who would sign that
But they
affidavit.
don't.
Right.
It could
That
be
is
brought
not
up and
feasible.
discussed, couldn't
But
it?
I know that if we ask them to sign one, they're gonna wanna review it and look at it and all of that sort of thing.
So it does, to me, it makes sense that, okay, because remember, I tried to have a meeting a week ago. And I'm not gonna get into all that except to say that I've lost 7 days just there. It took a while for the different responses and the,
Why can't we just ask the question if they'd be willing to extend?
it's been asked like 4 times.
That appeal time, well.
I guess Gary's
Let's
going
get
to
an
answer that.
And Jerry,
if I'm willing to sign an affidavit, yes.
No,
Another
if you're willing to say
30 days or
that
2 weeks
he can
to
have
start
30
with,
more
I don't
days
know.
to appeal if he wants to.
Enough
'Cause it doesn't-
time to try to just.
Is there any
button it up
reason why
and
we
get it
wouldn't?
done. 'Cause we don't wanna appeal, and we don't wanna.
I'm fine.
Okay, that's resolved.
Okay, so how do I get that then in writing, because he can leave here and change his mind?
Record it.
I know, but at the mediation, we can change our mind on that, right? We're not bound by anything sitting here.
Well, the whole point of mediation is.
So here's the deal then, will you agree before the timeline expires to send me an extension in writing?
I can facilitate that.
Okay,
Yeah.
if we can do that, that's
I
great.
didn't hear that, see who said yes. Who
I said yes.
The mayor, the chief officer, got it, thank you.
And I suppose that I have a timeline also, it's probably longer than his, but did you just include our request in that as well?
And that was from David.
Well, and since the Herald's not represented, I would ask for their timelines to be increased as well.
Well, they have to agree. It's not up to us.
They're the big,
They haven't
they're the
appealed.
big contributors.
By the way, just for your information, having contacted the Herald to ask about this finance issue being brought up the other day at Sherry's discussion, David Kennard, who is the managing editor, said that has been in the process for some time. Our corporate office requires 45 days, and to his knowledge, has been sent, but he's going to check. And I didn't hear the word back, but he knows that process has been in process, and he thought it had been mailed to you, but he was going to check. I never did hear back on that. So the point is, the payments have been activated. That's been made.
I don't
That hasn't happened yet. Wanted to find out what was gonna happen here tonight, so. The extensions have been made. Are you offering to the Daily Herald also, please, is the
Well-
question?
That's a.
I think
They
Rosemary
don't-
is saying
they-
that's not
up to the
optional.
They
Daily
don't
Herald.
have an appeal.
They don't have an appeal.
They don't have any deadline to extend.
Yeah.
They have agreed to pay.
There's
And
nothing, you
if
didn't deny
it's in
it.
process as you state, as soon as we receive that, then it gets processed. There's
Right.
nothing to extend.
Okay,
That's
There
correct.
you came
That's
to
fair
some agreement with it, is that right?
We did.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're fulfilling their request.
Okay,
Okay.
we'll leave them
Okay.
out.
Well, you're not really fulfilling, you'll start fulfilling once you see their money.
Correct. That's correct. Is there anything else to say?
I'm happy to quote to Mr. Cromar his conversation with me disparaging Brad Sears that he asked for. But I don't know that anybody else wants to hear that. If he wants me to tape it, if he wants to tape me rehearsing that back to him, I'd be happy to.
I think
I don't
much has
wanna
been
hear it.
unproductive on the part of the
Yeah,
city,
yeah.
disparaging character, and you would know about that.
You disparaged.
Thank
I
you.
didn't
All right,
say.
let's finish the meeting here. You guys can all just have a good time.
Stop, Daniel.
I just want to say to the residents that are here that my voice was raised at times because Mr. Deere asked me to speak loudly. It wasn't because I was trying
I
to
didn't
yell
hear-
at you or.
I didn't hear you ever
Yes.
increase it to any volume.
I was not angry if I was talking loudly. I was simply trying to make myself heard.
So did I hear you say,
Maybe
Gary,
everybody
that
ought to
you
hear
would
like me.
be willing to give him an extension? You personally said you would give?
I did say that.
Okay, but do we have to have everybody that matters or who votes, or I don't know how that works?
No,
That's
it's all good.
So it's all good? Okay.
So I just want to
I heard
say
it from
one last
Ken, yeah.
thing. I just want to thank all of you for coming and for participating in this process. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Rosemary, for putting this together. Could we give her a hand? Thank
But as the ombudsman, my job is to help people with grammar requests, so it doesn't matter if you're with the public or with government. If you have any questions, you can call me, that's my job. So feel free to do that, and I can work with the city on any of the issues of putting this together.
Sure.
I can help
Can I
with
say one
redaction.
more thing?
What,
In
yes?
response to what Gary said to me about, he felt like I didn't care about charging the city or costing the taxpayers. My husband and I, my husband's 74 and he's still working because we can't afford to retire. And we pay what we need to do on the golf course, we never go there. We're very frugal people, we would never intentionally want to charge the citizens of this city more money, Gary, and I want you to know we're all very concerned about that. We would not ever want to do that, so I was a little offended, and I've forgiven you for it, and I know you didn't mean to offend me, but none of us want to charge more money to the citizens
I
of
agree.
this city.
And so that's why I'm trying to minimize what you as the residents are going to pay. And so this process is going to cost you in taxpayer dollars. And I'm trying to minimize that as much as possible. So when Mr. Cromar wanted to take us to the records committee and then decided at the last minute he didn't because he wanted to go this route, that cost about $10,000 of your taxpayer.
Hold on,
That's-
hold on.
that's-
You
that's,
can't, sorry, I'm gonna clarify this, and it's really important, Gary, you know this, okay? We tried to get mediation, and Rosemary Cundiff will testify to this, Jerry will testify to this, numerous times at our request, would you please meet with her and us? You said no, no, no. Colleen finally said yes, and then the next day said no. You now have to meet prerequisites. And we met those prerequisites, and you decided not to meet with us. You said you've got to go file an appeal. And when you file an appeal, said the city attorney, then we'll talk to you. And then, excuse me, that's when you gave the prerequisites. Why is it so hard, Gary, that you want to initiate the financial expenditures of an attorney, as per your own words, and require us to file the appeal, and 2 days later you have a document 3 inches thick filed before the records committee?
You know, I know that's your narrative.
No, no, it's
But
the
it
fact.
just, but it just doesn't ring true. And so,
Really?
yeah, I mean, you're in.
Ask Rosemary, she will
I'll
witness to
tell you
it.
what,
I mean,
we sat down.
I called the meeting too and
Okay,
had
we're done.
stopped.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Stop.
We sat
Please,
down
Gary.
with you, Ken. We tried to mediate.
Sometimes you just gotta call them.
Just got it.
Can we give you your markers back?
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.